Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Vanessa. So with cabbage. Personally, I am wary of letting it on the menu because even if we subject vegetables to heat treatment, a number of microorganisms. Sam kept saying something about the cafe's current problems. But Vanessa heard him, but didn't listen. All her attention was magnetically drawn to a text message from an unknown number. "Your husband has a mistress?" That's what it said. They also had the address where the immoral lovebirds were to meet, as well as the scheduled time for the outrage. Vanessa darted a glance at the wall, where a large clock hung above the certificate of honor for the Golden Mitten contest. On their backing was a picture of Paris and lots of scarlet roses, a gaudy thing. But they bought them on a wedding trip when they were in the most romantic city on earth. And ever since then, Vanessa considered them as if they were her talisman. It was this watch that was with them always while she and her husband realized their dream. And according to the position of the hands of the clock, the next betrayal was about to take place. Exactly 55 minutes later, there was a nasty lump in the throat. My heart beat frequently and rhythmically in my nose. Fell as if Vanessa was about to childishly roar desperately and resentfully at the world. But she shyly clasped her hand tightly, so the nails with the fresh cherry manicure spun into her palm. She took a deep breath and with a low whistle, exhaled through her teeth calmly. So what happened? Finally, she turned her gaze and attention to Sam. The chief cook froze, clapping his eyes. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. So the Brussels sprouts are all off-white and the corn is canned. The cans are deflated, so throw them away. Nodded Vanessa, rising from behind the table of the head of the catering, and grabbed the handbag standing on it. And what about the menu? I can't buy new products at 6 o'clock somewhere. What am I supposed to do? You're a smart guy, Sam. Vanessa took her coat off the rack, grabbed her scarf, grabbed her gloves. We'll be changing suppliers. That's a definite. Think of something. Change the menu for now. For the next few days, okay, at your discretion. She walked right past him. Out of the office came the young tomato chef. Mick followed her. All tomorrow, close today on your own. Okay, but you'll manage. It's not the first time. Get dressed by the greenhouse. It's early September. Walk to the parking lot belonging to the cafe and get in the car. Start the engine. Vanessa coolly drove forward to where she needed to go. But at the same time, she was hysterical and refused to believe that such a thing was possible. Or believe that cheating was possible. It was long overdue, and she was just blind, a fool, confident in the unshakable style of her feminine happiness. They'd known each other since high school. Vanessa had been in it since she was a freshman. Benjamin transferred after his parents traded in the apartment. There was some family intrigue over living space with relatives moving to another part of town. He was a donkey above everyone in the class, but he could not claim the status of a threat and a menace because he was still very thin. For which, by the way, the witty ones nicknamed him Skeleton. "Are you a goth?" Vanessa asked him once. She just had to make conversation with the new kid at recess. So she said the first thing that popped into her head. "It's just that you're always in black and your hair is long." "No," Benjamin replied. "Just black hair. It's my grandmother's. She says it's how a person keeps the earth's energy." "I see," said Vanessa, who actually had more questions about the novelties. By the will of the teacher, they found themselves at the same desk, and this also contributed to their bonding. Soon the classmates realized that Benjamin, despite its necessity, nothing. So the guy studied well, but did not give up and could even give a write-off. He did not mess with bullies, but no one touched him. Why? Benjamin just had, as the boys joked, a super ability to resolve any conflict with just one look. And they respected him when it became known that he had been working part-time since he was 14. So he has his own pocket money, mercifully given by his parents for good behavior. And slowly, by the last year of school, a small company of Vanessa, Benjamin, and Tony had formed. That redhead and glasses, you and Tony. Tony was a typical excellent student and literally a nerd because he was eager to study all the flora of the planet. He went abroad on some kind of grant after graduation. and for 6 years he wrote long letters to his friends full of Latin names of fauna. He was studying, I think, shrubs in Mongolia or Brazil. But then it just kind of went to zero. He was a good kid, Tony. All we had to do now was reminisce about a former friend. And then there was Nancy, a good girl, and there seemed to be nothing more to say about her, because she was, well, such a good girl, she studied roughly. But the teachers sometimes grumbled, saying, well, somebody's in charge of the scholastics, and she doesn't take anything from her own head. She was always neatly combed, clean, dressed Monday, sundresses, water, caress on Tuesday abdominal suit. Wednesday, sundress and caress again. Thursday, skirt and blouse. Friday, dresses with old-fashioned all-yellow fifth lace collars. Yes, Nancy dressed for school clearly on schedule and never took compote or scones or anything sweet at all to the canteen. Sugar, the white death, she explained. One day, her resistance to the treat. I don't want to die. Young, I have a long and decent life ahead of me. Nancy never let anyone cheat and didn't talk much about herself. I mean, she did. But it sounded strange for a teenage girl, and even creepy. A decent person doesn't like pop music. He listens to classical music, respects opera. You have to live your life so you won't be ashamed in front of your great-grandfather. No, artists draw. Children just dabble. And felt-tip pens are poisonous nonsense. They'll give birth to sick children. You should marry in such a way that you won't be ashamed in front of your grandmothers. That's the sort of thing Nancy used to say. When, for example, she was asked about her hobbies or why she was so glum in art class. Nancy once told Benjamin, who by senior year not only got a haircut, but started wearing jeans and t-shirts. Basically, he looked like a regular kid. You're not twice if you're in a cult. Is there something going on at home? Benjamin was being humorous, but the subtext was serious. He just had a personal adolescent confrontation with his grandmother, who was a generally nice woman, but with some weirdness. Granny had moved to her daughter in the city from the countryside, abandoning the household and the familiar world. To help raise her grandson, helped, hampered, took care of the pension, did not spare to help the young family, but was a little bit with oddities. But Benjamin still loved her very much. Graduation, by the way, remained in Vanessa's memory for many years as the most beautiful events in the world. To be more precise, its first half, because the second half became a nightmare. But that day began wonderfully. In the morning, a hairdresser came to their home, who built on the head of a young girl hairstyle worthy of Pompadour, as said the master of beauty herself. It was curls, and the curls were crunchy. And from how much they were drenched with lacquer, and it was all covered with roses and pearls. There was makeup too, and not a timid drop of lipstick and mascara, but the grown-up version with cream powder blush, and even black pencil. Mom, though, cautiously asked, isn't that a little much? For a 17-year-old girl from a high school gala. But the hairdresser, Aunt Jenna, stuck her tongue out, looked angry and shook a magazine that said, in big letters, Fashion from Hollywood itself. You want your daughter to be the prettiest, don't you? Aunt Jenna asked. I want her to be my happiest, Vanessa's mom sighed. But since she likes it so much herself, Vanessa's dress was a looker. Flux colors of natural silk with added synthetics, with a heart cut out, and even the sandals were gold. Daddy had set aside a generous amount from his paycheck for one thing for his daughter. In general, at the prom she felt like a real princess, catching admiring glances. But what really mattered to her was the attention of only one man, Benjamin. And when the solemn school part was over and the graduates went up to the ship, the main and all terribly expected part of the holiday was expected on the water, then Benjamin suddenly drew Vanessa to a secluded corner where he stood close, took her hands and, looking into her eyes, said, in 3 months we will be 18 years old. Let's get married. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. It was that moment when Vanessa realized with delight that it was all over. Childhood was behind her. And here it was grown up, happy, incredible life opened its arms to her. She laughed, smiled at him, and told him she agreed. So they stood near the engine room in a secluded corner and gazed dreamily at each other. Nancy suddenly turned to Vanessa and saw her friend peering out of the corner. She was deathly pale and her face was twisted. Vanessa realized what was going on. Nancy repeated and rushed after the alumna, who ran to the upper deck. On the way, Nancy fell briskly to her knees, but didn't even seem to notice it. She caught up with her on the upper deck, where the tack and sway of the couple's dance was sounding. "Nancy, listen," Vanessa said. "We didn't mean to hurt you. And I love him, don't I?" She whispered back. Vanessa swallowed the words she still wanted to say. She had guessed that for a long time, hadn't she? It was hard not to decipher the glances Nancy was throwing at Benjamin. It was hard to ignore how already a bit wordy he was. The strange girl was starting to completely stutter and muddle her words when he appeared next to her. Except Vanessa seemed like it wasn't all serious. What kind of love Nancy had at all she knew exactly. There was no relationship. Yeah, she didn't even hold hands with boys, much less ever have anything. There was no romance with Benjamin. And now Vanessa thought they were all getting along. They'd talk like friends. She would explain how things with Benjamin were real. And Nancy would understand, even be happy for her. How could she not? And she'll be her maid of honor at the wedding. And Nancy will find happiness. Not with Benjamin. A senior called out to them. "Don't get too close to the boards. Those fences are a little flimsy. It's not a ship at all, but a trough." He muttered and went to the table with appetizers. But neither Nancy nor Vanessa paid any attention to his words. The sun shone at 6 o'clock, hidden first behind a wood pearl of gray clouds, and then hid behind a truly freight cloud. The wind came in rough gusts. The surface of the river merged in waves. "I loved him, I always have," exclaimed Nancy and clasped her hands. "Listen, Vanessa." It was unpleasant that their scandal might be at the center of the general celebration. She moved closer to Nancy, wanted to take her somewhere where she could talk without strangers. "You've got it all wrong. Benjamin and I are serious. Nancy, let's have a quiet, calm conversation." Nancy, "Okay. Who would ever think that you and Benjamin could have anything? Because I'm not as pretty and smart and straight a student as you." The girl snapped, her face creased ugly. She ran her hand over her face, smearing her lipstick. Yes, this day Nancy changed her habits and painted her lips a piercing scarlet color. "I hate you," shouted out, and she stepping back, clutching her back to the side of the ship. "Traitor, I thought we were friends." The other students were starting to look back at them already. Nancy stopped the hysterics, snapped back at Vanessa. "You and Benjamin have never even been on a date. What makes you think he has?" Vanessa didn't have time to finish, because suddenly there was a prolonged scraping of metal. Everything happened so fast that no one had time to do anything. All that was left was to watch in horror. Here Nancy staggered leaning backward again. Ridiculously, she waved her arms. And the next instant the segments of the fence, the deck of the ship simply broke off and flew down into the dark waves of the river, on which the early summer storm was already playing fiercely, and Nancy flew after it with a desperate shriek. Naturally, there was a commotion. Someone threw a life preserver overboard. The captain came running. People were screaming and pointing their fingers in the water. It was a terrible accident. And coincidentally, it didn't end well. And yet it didn't end as nightmarishly as it could have. The thing was that the ship was just passing by a shoal, on which the volume of the shoal was a few Nancy downstream, exactly in my typical doll literally nailed her shoal. But it so happened that the girl was just dragged through a sunken tree, and there was still some junk iron. Sharp rocks. Anyway, Nancy survived, but by the time she was rescued, she was badly injured. Word got out to last night's graduates. Slipped into a coma, and the ugliness on her face and body. Fractures open, scars that would last a lifetime. Vanessa was in shock. She felt so guilty. After all, if it hadn't been for their fight, Nancy would certainly have been more careful and not fallen overboard, but she hadn't had the chance to say anything to her friend. To apologize to her because Nancy's parents, as soon as their daughter's condition allowed it, had taken her away and moved to another town. Why? Well, I guess that's what they decided for some reason. Yeah, it was all just awful. But Vanessa did not have a chance to swim long in the consequences of what had happened, because life went on after all. Vanessa, it was time to take care of her future. And it wasn't easy. The thing was that her family wanted her daughter to become a lawyer. Vanessa had nothing against law, but her soul lay to something else. She wanted to be a chef. It so happened that since childhood she loved to cook. Her mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. And in general, the whole female part of the family admired and praised. After all, rarely a girl of 12 years can cook a full lunch or dinner for the whole family, and even herself tears constantly let, say, to the stove. But then, in general, admiration diminished when they realized that Vanessa decided to connect her fate with it. How so? How so, dear, serious practice? Prospects may even have their own law practice, but Vanessa was lucky with her folks. They grumbled, lamented the unfulfilled great hopes, but supported in the gastronomic dream. And Nancy enrolled as a chef, not in a technical school, but in a university. Her family paid for her studies and supported her in every possible way. Relations with Benjamin meanwhile developed smoothly, harmoniously, exactly according to the romantic scenario prescribed in advance. They met afterwards after the university, moved in together, so to speak, to live together. But it was clear to everyone that it was going to be a wedding. And the wedding was played, as it should be, with a white dress, doves, cake, shouts of bitterness, and a wedding trip to Paris for a week. Benjamin, by the way, decided to become a lawyer, and this partly consoled the family of his wife, who decided that okay, although take and manage to realize partly collective ambitions and dreams. Vanessa more than once said friends and colleagues that she is simply happy. Life goes on quietly, prosperously. There is income. The mortgage was taken and paid off ahead of schedule, but it seemed to Vanessa that she would give up everything in the world if her life came to her. The main thing that was missing to make her really happy, and the thing was that she could not get pregnant. Doctors' examinations, expensive clinics, and even attempts to eco. And then trips to remote villages to heal her Baucus, it was all useless. It was almost physical. It was painful to see off moms with strollers with an envious look in the street. How many times Vanessa had a dream. She is Perky in the arms of babies on 6 blankets, and he is her greatest treasure in the whole world. And then the merciless awakening hit, and she was flooding her pillow with tears. Benjamin, too, was crushed. Without the density of their marriage, and what's most frustrating is that the doctors said it was as if both couples were healthy, but it wasn't working. You see, human biology, his nature is a unique thing, divorced one old man, a professor, to whom they went to counseling. Modern science believes that sometimes strong and full man and woman are not able to have children because of, so to speak, individual genetic incompatibility. And so when everything was tested, when everything became clear, Benjamin and Vanessa found themselves faced with a choice. What to do next? After all, it was clear that theoretically, if each of them tried to build another family, there would probably and almost certainly be children there. Maybe we should just get a divorce. Vanessa once asked on the day this shower conversation took place. They were celebrating their 9th wedding anniversary. We could stay friends. She turned to her husband and shared any other words. That's how he looked at her. Don't ever talk about divorce again, he said. You love me and I love you. Since there are no children, it's fate. But we are married and only death will separate us. Remember, and they never talked about divorce again. And what of relatives and friends, even the closest ones, except mom and dad and those people who could be trusted? Anyway, they were the only ones who knew the whole truth. The rest of us thought it was just each spouse being infertile. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Benjamin, when all the guests had left, gave his wife another gift. What's this? She asked. When she opened the gift paper rustling in the night, she found a puffy folder with some documents. Something you've been dreaming of for so long, smiled her husband. I thought it was time for us to take a decisive step and change everything in our lives. Vanessa, raising an eyebrow in surprise, opened the folder and aghast almost dropped it. Because there were estimates and all other documentation related to the opening of their own cafe. Yes, a long time ago, back on their wedding trip, they had talked about it, but jokingly. So one day they said they'd open their own place. I've inquired, Benjamin added. We've been pre-approved for a loan to open a business. I've already looked at the premises. My favorite, I found out everything. He concluded shocked. We'll pull the wife into our arms, we can handle it. What do you say? Vanessa then cried long and loud. She was crying, she was barely able to cry, she was hiccuping with tears. But they were tears of joy. She'd been dreaming for so long. Yes, she kept putting it off. And her husband, her favorite man, took it and did it. Took all the decisive steps, and now it remained only to agree to risk everything with him for the sake of their common dream. Relatives and friends perceived the business project of the spouses ambiguously. Some praised, saying, "Keep it up. Go ahead. You'll become millionaires." Some of them twisted their fingers at the temple. After all, they decided to take a loan against the security of the apartment. And it was also required, by the way, to leave a stable job and go into open water. When it is known how many novice businessmen are soon disappointed in their ideas and remain, as they say, without pants. But Benjamin and Vanessa did not listen to anyone. They were stubbornly determined and boldly acted. They decided that they would not open either a flashy restaurant or a refined coffee shop, where people come for authors' drinks. They decided that they wanted to open an institution with homemade, tasty, simple and inexpensive cuisine, which, however, would not be a banal canteen, but an institution with its own zest. And how many difficulties came to light when you went from plans to reality? Sleepless nights risking losing your business and your apartment. Trying to guess which dishes people would like. One time they even had strange wigs and leather jackets stop by. Honestly, it was like a time machine from the 90s. There was something more about the roof. But Benjamin threatened them. That he's a lawyer, he's got big connections, and he's going to show them how to play the mafia. And those weird-looking checks never showed up again. And then, after a few years that seemed to fly by like a day, the couple realized they'd made it. They have their own cafe canteen, which has firmly established itself in the city's catering market and has its own clientele. Benjamin and Vanessa, although there was at some point such an opportunity, decided not to expand. Of course, opening new cafes of their own chain would have increased their income, but it would have forced them to attract outsiders to the top of the business. This would not have allowed to keep such a close eye on everything, to participate in all spheres of life of their brainchild. So they left it the way it was, and everything was fine. The family business was doing well. It would seem that what else is needed? But Vanessa had already accepted the fact that they wouldn't have children. All right, let it be. So it was indeed fate. But lately, in the last year, she suddenly began to notice how they were drifting apart. No, there were no fights, no scandals. But a coldness had crept into their marriage imperceptibly, just as a night frost can suddenly engulf a garden. Although the day before had been the most similar, but Vanessa had shrugged it off for the time being. Come to think of it, less socializing, not kissing in the morning, and not talking as often as before. I love you. After all, they're not young people anymore. They've been married for years. It's only natural. And then the stresses of business, when you barely have time to eat and take sleeping pills to sleep a wink. It's also a reason not to drown in the body, a sneeze of tenderness. With the other half, it was only that stupid contest, for which Benjamin obviously did not apply from a great mind, and Vanessa still did not find time to take it off. Anyway, it just seemed like married life was going on. They lived like normal people, nothing nightmarish, nothing to get hysterical about. But now, as Vanessa drove the car through the evening streets, she realized no, there were alarm bells. Yes, she was stupid and naive and had ignored them. Like the fact that her husband had been on the phone with someone a couple times and then abruptly ended the conversation when she walked into the room. Your husband has a mistress. The text of the text message seemed to be imprinted in fiery letters in her brain, and Vanessa, letting out a low groan, slammed her fists on the king in frustration. Av almost lost her grip on the steering wheel with both hands and bit her lip. She couldn't yet figure out what she was going to do when she didn't. Not the time for that right now, she just needed to figure it out, to make sure it was true. And so here she was, Velvet Restaurant. The text said they'd chosen the summer veranda, that it was their usual spot. Good evening. Grew up in front of Vanessa, a smiling girl, a waitress, but she only waved her off and walked resolutely forward. Many establishments still kept summer verandas. This one offered guests cozy plaid plaids and used tiny lamps imitating antique lanterns as lighting on the tables. Vanessa noted with a professional eye the well-chosen palette of the interior and the unobtrusive music playing in the background. She walked forward without feeling her feet. There was the familiar back of her head in front of her sitting in a chair, and a woman sitting next to her. She spotted her before Benjamin did and turned around. Vanessa stopped abruptly, as if she had hit an invisible barrier. Her eyes darkened. She exhaled 3 breaths, recognizing her rival. "Oh, Sam, I thought you were stuck in there until morning." Kate winked at the guy and boldly but innocently took him under her arm in a friendly manner. "Just had to check things out well. There are all sorts of things that happen," Sam said, squinting at his companion with embarrassment. Kate was 8 years younger than him. Barely 18 was this red-headed doll who must be out of her petite nether regions. She barely reached the top of his shoulder. She also reminded him of Kate because of her playful directness. Kate had been working as a waitress at Caesars for 3 months now. She'd gotten the job in a very unusual way. She just came in and said she wanted to work there. Although, by the way, in the ad clearly said that you need a person with experience, ready for intensive loads. Running around on your feet all day with heavy trays. That's no joke. The interview was conducted by the owner herself. I mean Vanessa. And everyone was actually shocked that she hired the new girl. She wouldn't last a week, Molly said. A dishwasher who worked part-time at Caesars because her pension wasn't enough to live on. "She's embarrassing us," she rolled her eyes. Emily is a waitress with the figure and face of a model. "I love every spare moment I have on my smartphone." Where she watched Turkish soap operas. Emily was very professional. She was tipped all the time. But sympathizing with the girl was hindered by her arrogance. She turned her nose up, saying that she was waiting for her Prince Charming and that he must be a millionaire. Such words were like a knife to Sam's heart, because he was in love with Emily a little bit. With a high level of unrequited love, and did not want Sam to notice at all the signs of attention that Kate was giving him. He perceived her no more than a little sister. Yeah, I guess that's what it was. Sam had always wished he had a little sister, or a family at all. He was an orphan. Once a long time ago, just a kid, he swore to himself that he would never repeat the path of his parents, who drank themselves to death. And when he got out, the freedom and will of adult life did not turn his head at all, no. The guy graduated from culinary school, managed to work on the pizza and sushi exchanges. Then he cooked for the culinary department of a large supermarket, and then taking the prize of audience sympathy. At the competition met with her, which at this competition took first place. And so by a happy accident, Sam began to work at Caesars, quickly working his way up from ordinary cook to chef and finally chef. Sam believed he was perhaps as compensation from the universe. For the bitter orphan childhood, he now lived a happy life. Everything was going well for him. If only there was still love in his life, but so far there was no love. He could devote himself entirely to professional affairs. And now Sam was proud that Benjamin, the owner of the place, had decided to take part in a new cooking competition. It was going to be a huge event. It was to be covered by both local and foreign press. And its uniqueness lay in the fact that it was to bring together the best catering establishments in the city. And the competition was not in something trivial, but in dessert. Sam believed, on such a space his bosses will go wild and will definitely win. And this victory, of course, will strengthen Caesar's position in the catering industry. After all, the competitors are not slumbering. Only in the last 6 months on the same street opened 2 establishments. In general, it was necessary to move in order not to go bankrupt. And the more offensive was Sam, when he learned that she, it turns out, considers the idea of the competition is a complete nonsense, and even scolded her husband for this. What does Caesars have to do with an institution with average and even modest cynic, where they serve unpretentious dishes, and a contest for professional pastry chefs for elite class establishments. What we're going to impress everyone with in a high-pitched tone. So everyone heard, did Vanessa Zatia with apple pie or girlfriends, or maybe with seasonal berries? We're just gonna get laughed at. Sam, aren't you listening to me? He was pulled out of his musings. Katya's offended tone and a palpable nudge of her small elbow in the ribs. Excuse me. Pensive. Sam coughed. Nervously, the rain began to fall, and he opened his umbrella over them. Kate was a terrible stretch, and despite the wet weather forecast, the umbrella was not with him. I asked, seriously repeated Kate, and her voice trembled strangely. Maybe we can go somewhere this weekend to the movies. Can there be a new movie like this movie? And let's absent-mindedly answered Sam. About what a movie about love with a huff, replied Kate, and so shot his blue eyes at him, thinking that Sam understood, and he got caught. Trapped himself, but he blanched. He couldn't just say, like a fool, that he'd remembered something important for the weekend. He called himself a dick. And then, as they say, Sam sighed well. What movie theater are we going to? After all, he thought, it's only a movie, not a date. So he will not owe anything to the picture. But from now on, he'd have to keep his ear to the ground with this duck. Looks like it's not such a kitten. Kate never worked a day in her young life before coming to Caesar's. Why would she? If her mom provides everything she wants, if she's spoiled like a princess. But there was a downside to that. Rigid, strict control. The only thing she needed to complete the picture was a flood collar. Kate grew up without a father. No, there was one, of course, but he wasn't talked about in their family. Her mom used to tell the little girl when she asked if he was dead. But then, when she was 14, she learned the truth. Her mother had given birth to her from a donor, flown overseas, and there in the clinic everything happened. Simply because Nancy wanted a child so badly. But she didn't want to get married and have relationships with men. That she strictly forbade herself, and Kate realized very early on why. It was because Nancy had a big problem with her appearance. Her face from her left temple to her chin was crisscrossed with bumps and crooked scars on her neck and shoulders, as if red reformed flowers were blooming. The doctors said that for some reason, perhaps due to a hormonal disruption, the body was unable to fully repair the areas damaged in the accident. The skin was formed with thick pigment flux. For this reason, Nancy never wore anything revealing. And if she had to leave the house, she stood in front of the mirror for long periods of time applying makeup. But it didn't hide the scars of her uneven face. Already at the age of 10, Kate knew grandparents in general native moms. They spent a lot to make her beautiful again. But the peculiarities of the body, its reaction to Lisa, they did not allow Nancy to fully visit plastic surgeons. After all, to somehow improve her appearance required surgery. And so at the family council, they decided that health was more important. And Nancy herself began to treat her peculiarities already philosophically. However, when Kate was little, she was still very offended that other children had fathers and she did not. "Mommy, you are my most beautiful," often said a simple-minded girl. "You should all love you? Let's find me a daddy. And you a husband." Sometimes Nancy would laugh at this. But more often she got very angry and told me not to talk nonsense. Later, in adolescence, when Kate was already beginning to realize herself as a person, she realized the whole nightmare her mother was living in. So, in principle, Kate allowed for the idea that even with physical disabilities, it was possible to love a person. But she also realized that the likelihood that her mother would meet such a spiritually rich man, for whom appearance is not the main thing, is extremely small. As for the mother-daughter relationship in general, it was good, but complicated. The fact was that Nancy firmly knew what was good for her daughter, and Kate thought it was completely stubborn teenage stubbornness that she knew better. The final straw that created the storm was her mother's words, which sounded like an order. That after school, Kate would go to a university of economics and become a manager. "I wanted to go to Africa to study animals." Kate objected, as if she were a child. "Mom, I'm not going to make a good manager. I'll die of boredom." "That's what, daughter?" Nancy said sternly, "As long as you live in my house and on my money, I'll decide what you do." And clearly, Nancy was used to commanding, because she herself had worked in the personnel department of a large enterprise all her life and kept subordinates from small to large, not counting her direct superiors. That's what they call in a tight grip. But since Kate character clearly went to the mother, and maybe in the mysterious father of the donor, the easy victory Nancy did not win, and the daughter simply hid her papers. So in the room she hid that her mother and grandparents could not find. Here announced Kotenko, folding her arms across her chest, and looking Volchok, I will not go to your university. No way, I'll go next year, wherever I decide. In the meantime, I'll live on my own money and pay for the utilities. Nancy only twisted her head and the next day blocked the card with which her daughter used to spend money. The grandmother said everyone wanted to give her a heart attack, and another day later gave her granddaughter one of her cards. I won't let my gold starve. Winked at Granny too. Grandpa kept neutral for a week and then said that love for animals is a sign of a good person, but not obedience to the will of parents. It's a sign of a rotten soul. So you have to look at it. What you're gonna make of yourself, he said. But if you don't fool around and seriously stick to your goal, I'll support you. And with such peripecias, a fake kitten found herself in the place of a waitress at Caesar's. The job, by the way, was harder than she imagined. But Kate, though Mykola, in the evenings was not going to quit. You repeated Vanessa enchanted and was horrified, looking at the one she thought had disappeared from her life forever. Hi, said Nancy. It's been a while. She grinned. Do you want coffee? What? But how could you? Raised her voice to Vanessa. She was putting her finger on her husband. What a bastard. And I'm with her. So you were in love with her then. So you've had it between you for a long time. How long has it been between us that you're dumbfounded? Asked Benjamin. There must have been something in Vanessa's tone, because the small fairy tale company began to look around the cafe. My husband has a mistress. Muffled from Vanessa's lips. But why? She grimaced in disgust. Although it seemed obvious, a pang of disbelief glanced at the couple in front of her. Favorite. Benjamin, rising, took a step towards Vanessa. There is nothing between us. Vanessa's lips trembled at the traitorous tentacles in her nose. You expect me to believe you. Hang in there, man. An inebriated voice came from a neighboring table. Behind him, some guy was sitting with a girl in a short dress. Until the last one. Then they might believe it. Veja, are you crazy? His companion risked pulling his arm. Stop it, I'm ashamed of you. And you lied to me yourself. Eh? Vanessa didn't care that their conflict seemed to have worked like the first fallen domino knuckle, dragging someone around in a similar showdown. You can trust him, Nancy said. We're just dating. Ah, that's how Vanessa deftly turned away from her husband and slapped his outstretched hand. That's interesting. How so? Does that mean we're friends, and where do friendships take place in the bunkhouse? Should we call security? Whispered one waitress to another. What if they start trashing the place? I don't think they should. Whispered back the other seemingly decent people. Vanessa stood there and barely felt herself in reality. She was torn by contradictory feelings. On the one hand, a burning resentment and a willingness to send their marriage into tatters right now and throw the wedding ring in the traitor's face. On the other, a desperate longing to believe everything, even the outright lies. Let your spouse take you away from here and forget everything like a terrible dream. Vanessa sobs muzzle and often oversees vision behind the fog. Because the tears did rush from her eyes. Vanessa reached as through a layer of absorbent cotton to her the voice of her ex-girlfriend. There's nothing between us. He's telling the truth. And then Vanessa finally burst into hysterical sobs. She flopped down. Would have come out with her heel on the floor. But her husband gently grabbed her by the shoulders and sat her on a chair, brought her a glass of water. The waitress girl handed it to him. But I got a text. Vanessa was rambling. What's going on? Why are you two meeting in secret? Is it true? Is it not true? She asked, shifting her gaze from her ex-girlfriend to her husband and back again. It is, they both answered in unison. What place did you get? Nancy asked. And from whom? I don't know, shrugged Vanessa and took out her smartphone and put it on the table. Here's the message. Nancy and Benjamin leaned over the screen. I don't know that number, Benjamin muttered. This is some kind of evil joke. Nancy, what do you think? Oh, you little brat, Nancy exclaimed. And she struck the table with such force that the tiny vase of late herbarium bouquets, which had fallen to the floor, shattered. Alpay guiltily turned Benjamin to the waiters, who had just been sighing calmly. But after the outburst from Nancy, they tensed up again. There was no way to get away from the dinner grandmother had prepared. And now, finding herself in her room, Kate from the table tone unbuttoned the leg of her jeans. Wistfully, thinking about the fact that she'd swallowed what must have been a week's worth of calories, no less. Good thing at least she was now spared lunch at Nana's, because she was eating lunch at work. That's for family, though. Kate said that she lunches there, and herself tried to limit herself to an offended yogurt or an apple, because she considered herself a half. Yes, weight versus BMI hinted that this was true. It was a magical evening. He and Sam went to the movies and sat in the back rows. He was crunching popcorn, drinking unhealthy soda, and she was looking more at him than at the screen. Kate was in love to the point of butterflies in her stomach, and genuinely thought it was real feelings. And the fact that she'd had such a crush before that was the real deal. What kind of romantic infatuation could there be in high school? Just a dalliance? They were boys who were shy. True, it may have been partly so that this grandmother and mother strictly controlled her social circle, not allowing her to hang out with boys who wouldn't be afraid to say at least on the eve of graduation, "I fell in love," but what was what was. Now Kate considered herself a grown-up, practically an accomplished woman, and was ready to literally fight for her happiness. Since Sam was so uncomprehending, to think he hadn't even tried to kiss her for nothing. It turns out that she poured those expensive perfume from the elite brand, which promised, not according to advertising, to drive any man crazy. The next morning, Kate didn't have to go to work, a legitimate day off, and she was going to get some sleep and then go to the zoo. But the morning right after breakfast, when Grandma left to visit a neighbor, they were both into growing orchids and were going to move the plants to winterize. And when Grandpa left for the clinic, he had an appointment with an ophthalmologist. In the morning, Kate's mother suddenly knocked on Kate's room. "Daughter, we need to talk," she said. The overtone was calm, almost affectionate. But Kate had a feeling as if an unknown animal had slid across her back like a clean paw. It was a bad feeling. And then Kate walked into the hall and saw the look on her mother's face. Oh, she knew what was coming. "Daughter, how do you explain this?" asked Nancy, and pointed at the smartphone and the texts Vanessa had sent her the day before. Kotia stretched out in a string. She folded her arms across her chest and pressed her lips together. What did she have to say about it? "Because I want to protect you," the girl blurted out, and then, unable to stand the fact that her head was spinning like tornadoes, a field tornado ripping through her head. "Because I can't watch you ruin yourself." "Did you call Benjamin?" asked Sam, standing in the supervisor's office. "I asked for no middle name, but it was Benjamin. Because I feel too solid, you know." "I understand, Benjamin." "Sorry, I won't do it again, round my eyes, Sam." And all I had to do was grin at him. What a weirdo, huh? He's not a small man, and he's not a teenager, but he acts like a kid, honestly. But actually, Benjamin Sam sympathized. It was weird. But sometimes he caught himself thinking that if he ever had a son, he would want him to be like Sam. Probably just as smart, good-natured, hardworking, talented. Yeah, it's an unfair world. Some bastards, alcoholics, throw their own child at the mercy of fate. And people who dream of children can't give birth to them. I'm talking about the pastry contest. Benjamin, thoughtfully tapping his pen on the table. I think Vanessa is right. She is a good cook, but not a pastry chef, and has never been good at desserts. Therefore, her candidacy to participate is canceled. I mean, that's what Sam said disappointedly. So Keezer's out. It was such a brilliant chance. There is a chance, Benjamin grinned. And teaser is in. You're just going to the contest. You what? I'm rounding my eyes, Sam. But Benjamin, I mean, it's impossible. The guy's got his hands up in the air. Why? Now Benjamin looked stern. You have a lot of experience. Not a bad education. There's experience in competitions. But there will be people like that out there, Sam objected. There's a chef from Adele's restaurant. He's in Michelin restaurants. Used to work in New York and London. And the coffee shop, they also have their own pastry shops all over the city, such people. The guy took a step back, like he was about to be dragged off to the pageant right now. Benjamin, don't. You're a smart guy, Sam sighed, co-owner Caesar. And remember, when you first became chef, you suggested introducing tiramisu, glossy cakes, and a chocolate fountain to the menu. We, of course, said no. After all, our profile is the most common home-cooked food, and not something you can't make at home. But we'd have to complicate the kitchen, and the price tag would be high. We have to stay the course. We're like a good canteen in terms of prices and assortment, but like a cafe in terms of service and atmosphere. But now, Sam, this is your chance. And you're a man who's accomplished so much, aren't you? Will you let him in? There was silence in the office for a few minutes. Everyone was thinking about something else. And then Sam looked up, clear-eyed. He had made his decision. Okay, Benjamin, just Benjamin. Okay, I agree, I'll do my best. But if I win, he added with a cheerful smile, we'll discuss again what we can include in our menu. Deal. Deal, Benjamin smiled back at him. Kate didn't realize that her mother was ruining herself right away, and even at first, she was happy about it. And how could she not be happy that her mother, who was already over 40, suddenly decided that she was still a woman who did not want to spend her life without love? Which meant she needed to find a man to be her soulmate. Nancy suddenly decided that her physical imperfections were no reason to give up her personal happiness. Kate was thrilled, but it wasn't that simple. At first, Nancy tried to find a suitable candidate for future husband among her entourage, friends, buddies, and colleagues. There wasn't much choice, but one man reciprocated. His name was Nick, and at first glance, he seemed quite decent. His home does not drink, divorced. But that's just the little things in life. Anything can happen. But then suddenly Nick borrowed money from Nancy. Then he borrowed again. She upgraded his car and bought him a huge plasma TV. Then Nick said he wanted to start his own business, and therefore needed more money. I may be a historian, said Kate's grandfather, but I'm not out of my mind yet to fall for his lies. I mean, it's a common Alfonso. Nancy at first defended her lover, but then, as soon as she canceled Nicholas' financing, he immediately showed his true colors. Nancy naturally cried. But then she decided one failure doesn't solve anything. And after a while, she met a new man. His name was Gosha, worked in the car service, and he earned obviously well, because he was a master of high class. And it seemed that with him you can definitely be behind a stone wall. But suddenly it turned out that he dreams of a child, and only to have a child, and that's it. And then you can do whatever you want, sweetheart. It turned out that Gosha was the founder of his own philosophy, according to which his genes are among the most valuable on planet Earth and should be spread everywhere. In the end, Gosha admitted that he had a dozen kids at least all over the country. He'd also confessed that sometimes he switched his girlfriend's pregnancy prevention pills for ordinary vitamins. Anyway, Nancy broke up with him, a little horrified, and for a couple more months, very disturbed. Because she was just taking the pills and she was afraid. Was she pregnant? Nancy's next man was Martin, a handsome man just under 30, whom they met when, as a cab driver, he drove Nancy and her daughter to the dental clinic. And as with previous beaux, Martin had turned out to be a surprise. He just believed in aliens. He believed that the Earth is secretly ruled by reptiles, and to protect themselves from them, you need to drink infusion, special from herbs and mushrooms, which he himself collected. But that wasn't the end of it. After parting with Martin, other men appeared in Nancy's life. A bandit, an alcoholic, and another type, who decided that when the kitten turned 18, she would also become his mistress. And your mother's all right, winked the immature sleuth. One day, Nancy. After that, by the way, Kate's grandmother drank heart drops for a long time. And grandfather threatened that Nancy should not be married off, but put in a madhouse as a spoilsport. Who? Said Lisa. Kate. Grandma, what kind of spell? Mom just gets the wrong men. If this keeps happening, I don't know how we're going to live. Lisa said, I don't know how we're going to live. a thorough family conversation took place, at which Nancy was persuaded with a chorus, "Stop trying men if you're not lucky." No love life. Well, that's just fate. What do you want? Father was telling young Nancy off like a fool. We have a place to live. The apartment for Kate is bought, the house will be finished, and the young people will have their own corner. 2 cars, savings for a rainy day. You have a profession and a salary that makes me jealous. We fly to Europe every year. We live. We don't know what to do. Is it on the men? That's all right. Don't embarrass me. I'm not risking myself or my daughter anymore. No more dates. It's a deal. And for a while, Nancy went quiet. She seemed to have forgotten all about trying to make a life for herself. But then Kate noticed something was wrong with her mom. She visited a beauty salon, bought a new dress and boots, but most importantly, her eyes were shining in a special way. Then Kate realized Mom was in trouble again, and she decided to stump another nonsense just on the route, just to find out who Mom was messing with again. But there was no need to play detective. Everything was decided by chance. Just one day, Kate was called into the office of the owner of Keezer's to talk about the peculiarities of the working schedule. And it so happened that the door to the office was slightly open, and she heard Benjamin talking on the phone and a few phrases in which slipped special such information about life. The little girl realized that Benjamin was talking to her mom, and she was just shocked. What kind of a nasty coincidence was this? And she also realized that even though Benjamin seemed like a normal man, he was not at all like the others. But her mother is in trouble again because Benjamin is married. Vanessa made a very good impression on Kate, and the girl decided that she had to act, so she sent her a message from her second phone number, which was unknown at work. All her fears and worries accumulated in her heart. Kate spilled out in a stream of emotional speech, overdriven by tears, gesticulation, such that almost knocked off the nightstand collection of grandmother's porcelain shepherdess. And finally, Kate fell silent. The girl was breathing hard, as if she'd run 100 meters. "I've said everything," she finished in a colorless voice. Nancy's daughter was shocked by what she heard. Yes, she was well aware of how unsuccessful her attempts to find a man had been. And she had given up all plans for personal happiness. She had learned to get used to a lot of things in her life. First, she had gotten used to the fact that her parents had taken her away from this town to another, away from anything that would remind her of tragedy. But then, after Nancy's grandmother died, they had decided to return to this hometown, because it was once Nancy who had been particularly insistent on leaving. And now with her passing, that commitment was being canceled. "My daughter, my dear," my Nancy stepped toward her, and though Kate tried to dodge, suddenly she hugged her, pulling her to her, took her hair away from her wet face, and gently stroked her cheek. "It's all right, but my silly girl. Why didn't you say anything to me? Would you have listened to me?" clapped Kate. "You've been dragging things out with everyone to the last minute, till it got bad, and yet you shook your head. Nancy, we're all you and I'm grandparents. We've talked about everything. I realized that I guess it really wasn't fate. I guess I'm destined to spend the rest of my life alone. But honey, you've got it all wrong, Benjamin. I was really in love with him once," Nancy said thoughtfully, and tears welled up in her own eyes. And then she told Katya for the first time that she had once had feelings for Benjamin. But the silent one was timid and didn't even try to talk to him about it. And how it all ended, told neither he nor she, of course, was to blame for what happened, Nancy said. "It was all my fault. Stupid I was. But now years later, I just wanted to tell him that I had let go of those feelings, that things had changed. We met and decided we were just going to be friends. And as for his wife," Nancy grinned. "I didn't know what Vanessa was like now, did I? I was afraid she wouldn't approve. You know, they say it's impossible for a man and a woman to be friends. But it's not true. Maybe. Benjamin and I used to date. I don't deny it. But as friends, we'd walk around town, reminisce about our high school days. What's wrong with that? And what's in it for you, daughter? And what do I swear to you, daughter? To make you believe that there was nothing between us." If Kate had any strength left, she would have burst again. Now from the realization of what a stupid thing she'd done, how she'd essentially set her mother up by putting her in such a bad position in front of her ex-girlfriend. "I believe you." Kate nodded. "Mommy, I'm so sorry, please. I didn't mean to." "Yes, I forgive you." Nancy waved her hand. "After all, it would be weird and wonderful if you didn't do something stupid at your age, so we'll just consider it a supplement to your belated teenage rebellion. By the way, there's my life as a job." "All right," Kate smiled through her nose. "It's all good. There's a contest coming up, but it's unlikely we'll win. The competitors are just dragons. And then there's this guy. I like him." She lowered her eyes. "Come on," Mom beckoned her. "Sit down and tell me about it. Let's go to the kitchen. I think Grandma's famous berry pie is still there. We'll talk over tea." That day, Vanessa went to work like a hard labor. The mood was a nightmare. Not only did her parents again read tedious lectures about the fact that she should go to university and not work as a waitress, but the guy she met on the dating site turned out to be not the youngest businessman with a startup worth $1 million, but an ordinary guy who immediately admitted that he put his photo on the shots with expensive cars and resorts in Dubai in order to attract girls. "You know the saying," he said, taking Emily to a cheap diner that served donuts and didn't even have decent coffee, just the simplest of instant packets. "You meet people by their clothes." "I don't know," Emily replied, squeamishly setting aside the greasy donut. "What do you think? Who's going to go out with you after that?" "Why not?" He shrugged. "I'm a regular, normal guy. I'm not an oligarch. I work in a factory. I live with my mother and grandmother. We have an apartment in a nice neighborhood. There's greenery all around, and in the winter we make snow towns in the yard." "But why do you do it?" Emily asked stubbornly. She was just curious. "Yes," Nick shrugged again. "The girls today are you know what kind of girls, but their demands are high." "What to do?" "Well, I figured I'm a normal guy. I want to date someone like you. Beautiful, smart. Don't think I'm going to spend my life just working in a factory. I mean, I'll be a foreman later on, like my father was." "You're a fool." Emily laughed, and, having risen, has dropped on a plastic table a handful of change. "I can pay for the treats myself." "Yes, wait, you," Nick tried to grab her by the arm, but the girl shuffled aside her nose. "Yeah, but you wouldn't give a normal guy a chance. If I was rich, I'd stay. Is a tight wallet all that matters to you? And she's so beautiful. I thought you had an inner beauty too." "Yeah, but I poked you, Emily, and I got out of your coffee. And so it was time to go to the hated job again." And Vanessa was 20 years old, and she realized that she would be like that without education. She would be a saleswoman or a waitress. But Emily was not going to go to university to lose her young years there, so that then she could sit on low wages for years while others would live beautifully. However, here's Caesar. She was only earning seniority and experience. And then she was going to luxury restaurants to get a job where the crowd is more decent. And she'd definitely be able to pick up a wealthy man, although just last night she had an idea. And what is she waiting for when she already has a wealthy man, that is, the co-owner of Skeezers? Emily had had a good time studying him. He seemed to be a gentleman, which meant one that would be easy to spin. As for his wife, Emily could see perfectly well that Vanessa, despite her substantial income, looked like a shepherdess. Her hair has gray hair, her makeup the most inept. He is her even old man, the figure with age has floated, that is called. If she had that kind of money, Emily would definitely walk like a queen and in the fall would go not on the shuttle bus, but in a private car with a driver and not in a jacket. Simple went from which the figure as a barrel and in a fur coat mink or even lynx. So Emily decided, why not? She is young, beautiful, fresh, and knows how to behave with men. Benjamin, who is accustomed to his spouse a woman's pleasant dish, will definitely not resist. The main organizer of the contest for restaurants and cafes of the city was the restaurant White Swan. Many funds were spent on the preparation. And now the kitchen was ready to receive the participants. Everyone was going to allocate their workplace. The very presentation, dessert from the contestants, as well as their tasting by the jury were to take place in the main and most spacious banquet hall of the restaurant. And of course, the cream of society was invited to this event. Sam was shaking nervously at the mere thought of participating in all this, and he wondered 100 times a day whether it would be better to give it all up. But the boss's promise had already been made, and Sam's name was on the list of competing chefs representing their establishments. So the fact of the matter was that all we had to do was accept it. But that didn't stop me from being nervous. "Benjamin, excuse me, are you busy?" Emily slipped into the office. This day, Keezer's was closed to the public for the reason that there were workers working in the hall. Finally, it was decided to replace the light fixtures on the ceiling, as well as update it in general with decorative elements. To Benjamin's taste, however, it was unnecessary. After all, who goes to the cafe in the dining room to admire the ceiling? But since his wife insisted, he didn't mind giving in to her. Workers were hard at work in the hall. Chief Gennady remained in the institution. He'd volunteered to help keep an eye on the place. And Benjamin was getting ready. Today was the day, the pastry contest. He'd been so busy lately, he wasn't glad he'd gotten involved. And now he'd missed the first opening act of the event. Vanessa, who had wanted to go there, certainly together, had been patient with him and nervous. And he could even understand why. Because even though they had talked about everything thoroughly, and she seemed to believe that nothing had happened with Nancy, there was still some tension between them. And now they were almost fighting. In the end, Vanessa said all right, so be it. She would go alone without her husband, even though it was such an important event. She left and told him to hurry up. "Actually, I was just leaving," Benjamin said, turning away from the table where he was stacking the business papers he had to deal with tomorrow. "Emily, it's not a work day, is it? What do you want?" "I know about the schedule. We're rearranging it again." It wasn't work that sang out. She came closer, and Benjamin stared at her perplexed. "You see, I was going to confess to you. I was going to label you a beauty, who today wore her most seductive mini dress under her jacket, which was more like a sweater in length." And Emily, closely approaching Benjamin, talked about how spectacular, imposing man he is and how his powerful male energy is simply impossible to resist. "I'm ready for anything," she said in a voice that she thought sounded incredibly seductive, and bit her lip. "Just tell me to do it." "Emily." Benjamin, who was literally sandwiched between the insolent girl and his desk, a little panicked. He'd never had an adventure like this before. "What are you doing?" "You're old enough to be my daughter." She replied that age is not important, and that she only dreams that an experienced, solid man will guide her and support her financially. So you, Benjamin, couldn't believe your ears. The thing was, he knew Alina's parents a little bit. They were decent people. And he couldn't believe their daughter could behave so ugly. "Do you want to be my kept woman?" "Oh, yes," exhaled Emily, rolled her eyes and pitched forward, now actually falling on Benjamin. And it was at that moment that the door to the study fell open and Vanessa walked in. She had come back because she had decided no, she could only go to such an important event with her beloved husband, her hope and support. Without whose support Keezer would not exist at all. Vanessa had been thinking a lot in the last few days. She and Benjamin had overcome so much together for so long, and she realized she was ready to believe him after all. And Vanessa was going to tell him all that now. But now she felt like the room had run out of air. Her knees weakened. She was just shocked to see him with that girl. "Ah, so that's how you are then?" Vanessa exclaimed to the kept woman. "Well, that's to be expected, right?" Benjamin's favorite Benjamin pushed Emily away from her. "It's not what you think it is." Ah, that's how Vanessa squinted her eyes dangerously and swung angrily at him with her purse. Typical male excuse. "How are you?" "It's because she is." She looked at her rival squeamishly, and yet with fear. "You decided not just to cheat on me. You're tired of having an inferior wife. You decided to have a baby on the side. I hate you." There were tears in her eyes, but Vanessa did not allow herself to develop. "That's it. You can do whatever you want. But today is a very important day for Caesar, and you're not going to ruin it for me." Having said that, Vanessa ran out of the office, ran through the hall, almost carrying a stepladder on which one of the workers was standing, and then ran out of the establishment. "What a fool you are." With squeamish regret, Benjamin looked at Emily. "You're fired." And he rushed after his wife. Emily pressed her lips together. This had not turned out the way she wanted it to. And she hadn't thought about the fact that this guy might even tell her parents. If he thought of such a thing. Emily sighed, cleaned herself up, and looking proudly in front of her, left the office. The girl was cautiously late. She heard a response. And the next moment she had already sewn a large bucket of paint, which flooded her new suede boots. And then with chagrin and all, Emily just cried. Sam looked down at his hands and also at the table where the ingredients lay, ready to be transformed into a magnificent dessert. And how scared was he? He was surrounded by professionals, pastry geniuses. What's he doing here anyway? He's a simple kid from an orphanage who doesn't even work in an elite restaurant, but in a cafeteria canteen. Sam thought for a long time about what to surprise the sophisticated public. He went through a lot of complicated dessert recipes, each of which could safely be called a work of confectionery art. But then he suddenly remembered the main condition of the contest was to prepare a dessert that the chef thought was the best. That is, that he personally thought was the best. And such a dessert was on Sam's mind. He tasted it for the first time in an orphanage. There worked one teacher. Her name was Nina, and she was a kind, but unfortunately childless woman who, not knowing the joys of motherhood, decided to devote herself to the care of poor children who were left without family warmth. And sometimes she treated the pupils to what she knew how to cook best, apple pie. Sam, like many orphans, adored candy, chocolate, and all kinds of sweets from the store. But nothing could compare to this pie with apples. And then, when he graduated from the orphanage, he continued to correspond, to call this nice woman. They maintained friendly relations, and he also asked her for the recipe for that apple pie. So he decided now, why not make it after all? The choice of recipe is his decision, and that's the only way the contest rules. And the fact that he's not as exquisitely refined as others, that's not his problem. He'll just make the dessert he thinks is best. But Sam decided to add a little something of his own, yes. Sam kept the same apple pie at the heart of the cloudy charlotte, with apple slices stacked on the bottom of the mold. But he complicated the recipe by adding hazelnuts and a little honey to the apple. And finally, to somehow decorate the dessert, Sam decided not only to sprinkle the finished pie with powdered sugar, but also to serve it with whipped cream. And once again in his mind, repeating all the steps, Sam resolutely set to work. Now his nothingness, even if an angry tiger suddenly appeared in the kitchen, could not distract Mom. "Thank you so much," Kate thanked him again. Nancy had made some useful connections over the years, and it was one of those connections that allowed her to get 2 invitations to this contest. But Nancy wasn't interested in that sort of thing. And she came here, of course, because her daughter wanted her to. She wanted to support the boy she was in love with. And on this occasion, by the way, Nancy decided to waive her own rules about not giving her daughter money, and together with her went to the store where she paid for a very smartly colored holiday dress for the kitten. And now they were among the guests. "Mom, there are such delicious pills," and chocolate-covered strawberries. Kate had one bad domestic habit. She often tried to carry more in her hands than she could carry. She'd gotten caught a couple times at work, when she'd taken an order and instead of going to the kitchen to get it, she'd loaded one tray twice at a time. As a result, it flew to the floor, but after she was reprimanded in front of the whole team and deducted the cost of missing dishes from the salary, Kate did not do so. But now for some reason again did so a girl hurried to her mother with a tray of delicious, and there were glasses of alcoholic fruit, cocktails, and when it was necessary to warm up. Kate failed to perform this maneuver, and as a result the contents under the nose flew on the floor and partially on the costume of this man. Oops, sorry, Kate was jumping around the injured man, offering paper napkins. Kate's daughter. How could you not be so neat? I apologize for her too. Nancy showed up. It's not worth the trouble. Mademoiselle Madame answered them in a strong foreign accent. A man. He looked to be about 45 years old. Black hair with a noble gray at the temples. A neat beard and mustache. Shrewd gray eyes and strong-willed facial features. He was dressed in a Kremlin and suit with a mottled silk tie, and in tone with it a silk handkerchief in his jacket pocket. And now on the light-colored fabric of the suit, with no glassy stains, blurred traces of the thick sauce based on cream cheese and tomatoes, which earlier had been crabbed in their baskets. "I guess it's not so terrible," the man smiled, rejecting the offer to wash it all immediately. "Really, ladies, I'm not worth your concern. I've had worse things happen to me. My hotel is almost an hour away, and I don't want to miss a minute of what's going to happen here." So he threw up his hands. "Let's just consider it an eventuality, the usual course of life. May I?" He pointed with his hand to the stage from which the contest organizers had already announced something important. "I apologize, but I must leave you. I need to say a few words too." "Who's that? Don't you know?" Nancy casually asked thoughtfully as the man withdrew. It was very strange, but she suddenly felt something inexplicable. It wasn't like the silly romantic interest that had come over her when she'd met those other men, the ones she dreaded to think about now. "I don't know," Kate shrugged, "but he looks French. Your daughter was right to join the conversation. One of the guests of the evening is a lady in years in a black floor-length evening dress and a fur cape on her shoulders. His name is Antoine de Father. He is a legendary restaurant critic who has traveled the world to tell true foodies what is worthy of attention." The lady sighed admiringly. "It's a pity he's about to end his career now." "Really? Why?" Kate asked. "You see," the lady said eagerly, "Antoine started out as a chef and only then changed his trade. Now he intends to open a French restaurant. Yes, by the way, let you not be deceived by his name and excellent knowledge of this language, although he was born in Paris, but his mother was from the USA. And now he has decided to return to his roots. Came to us to travel and choose where to settle down. But he's a special guest of honor here, and it's even scary to imagine how much the organizers of all this paid for him to agree to take part in the jury and to give his opinion of the contestants. And if he speaks badly of Sam, I don't know what I'll do to him," Kate muttered. "Vanessa, we need to talk." Benjamin was beginning to feel like he was out in the desert chasing circulation. Because ever since they'd come here, his wife had been slipping away from him. And while he could understand her, who would enjoy catching their other half in such an ambiguous situation? But right now, he still couldn't understand why she just couldn't stop and let him explain himself, as he had already done when she had caught him in Nancy's illusorily compromising society. Finally, he caught up with her. Vanessa stopped at one of the Greek-style columns, which in this room served more as decorative elements than actual supports. Vanessa stood with her arms folded across her chest. "What do you want to talk about? Divorce? What? Honey, come on." Benjamin dropped his hands doomfully. He was ready to talk, but he counted on a calm, sober dialogue, not a monologue from his own side, in which all the words would be as if into the wall and bounce off the stubborn negative mood of the wife, her desire to close and her far-fetched resentment. "Tell me how long this has been going on." But there was nothing, Benjamin replied. He looked her straight in the eye, and would have given anything in the world, it seemed, just so she could read in his eyes the confirmation that he wasn't lying. The first time was Nancy. "We met as friends, talked. She asked, said she wanted to talk to you too, but later. Remember what kind of friends we were? There was no other company like us at school back then. You see, Nancy, she was just afraid you'd take it the wrong way." So Vanessa feared correctly and looked away defiantly, but immediately turned her face back to him. "Okay, that's taken care of. Are you just friends with this Elena too?" "No," Benjamin shook his head. "But I could swear on anything you say that I didn't give her any reason to behave that way. But you yourself know that the other waitresses, the staff in general, have been complaining a little about her. That she's been acting a little too loose with the guests, like she's flirting with some of the men. We didn't pay attention to it, of course, but I think I know what she wanted. The other waitresses used to say that Emily dreamed of finding a rich husband and any patron at all. Quick, Vanessa grinned bitterly, so she decided to go for it. What a girl her lips can be. A smile touched her lips for the first time since the quarrel. And it put hope in Benjamin's heart, so she started it first. And you were just confused, but you were getting ready to fight back. When I came in like that, yes, it was like that, Benjamin exhaled. Vanessa, I can't prove to you that I'm not lying. All I can do is to be as honest with you as I have always been with you. And then it's up to you. But I love you, and I don't want any other woman in the whole world. Even if Vanessa had a hard time drowning, I can't bear you a child, Emily, or some other young girl. They could. You be a father. You know, a long time ago, when I was a kid, Benjamin said, I used to dream that I was a bird, and when I woke up, I felt so disappointed. I thought it was so unfair. But then I realized that not having wings is just part of life, part of the world I exist in. It's the same with fatherhood. I won't hide it. I've wished for it, and I continue to wish for it, and probably will for the rest of my life. But that doesn't mean I can give up on you. You're my favorite woman. You're my other half, Benjamin practically whispered. And that's the most important thing to me. Nancy had already prepared many words of reconciliation, but now they all seemed shallow and inappropriate for some reason. And so, taking her husband's hand and meeting his gaze, she said just a few words. I believe you and thank you for being with me. Sam hasn't felt so insecure since. What was there to say? He had never felt so insecure in his life. What was I going to do? I had to go on stage. This was what all the contestants were supposed to do, where they briefly talked about the institutions they represented and the visas they had chosen for the competition. Keezer's can't be called an extra-class establishment, Sam said of his place of business after announcing that he had made an apple pie. We don't have any celebrities coming in, whose autograph you can hang on the wall, and we don't do branded dishes. Our menus are designed to season in advance. We do not have banquet halls, and to us, I admit, do not go on romantic dates or celebrate birthdays and other holidays. But we do appreciate each and every one of our customers. They are so different. There are a lot of regulars. For example, we have a factory worker who comes to us. He's a father of 3 kids. He always takes 2 meat dishes from us. Can you imagine? But he never takes sweets. He says he can't eat a bite. If one eats it all, he won't share it with the kids. Such an amazing person. And Grandma Zina also comes to visit us. She's very old with a stick, but she shows up at our house regularly. How does she get her pension? She always asks the waitress to calculate in advance how much it will cost to eat. She speaks very cordial. She reminds us how in my youth as a girl I used to visit the canteen at the factory. And we always give her a cup of tea as a gift from the institution and a spoon or a sweet bun to it. We say it's for all regular customers, so she believes us. That's the kind of place we have. In general, I realize with my mind that I don't feel quite at ease here. Sam waved his hands, paused, and sympathetic laughter rang through the hall, but mostly without malice or snide remarks. And actually, I wouldn't risk participating. Yeah, well, my bosses sent me, so I'll give it a shot. And from here on out, let it be what it will be. And he left the stage. The exciting and most important moment came. Now the desserts were brought out one by one. Some, like Sam's apple pie, could be cut into slices, and others, if they were portioned, were made in several pieces at once. And now the desserts were on the tables. The audience froze. And the judges were concentrating on savoring the best delicacies from the city's top establishments. Hi, Sam said. He, noticing Kate in the hall, approached her. Hi, said the girl and introduced him to her mom. Are you nervous? Asked Kate. No, Sam sighed. The main thing is not to win, but to participate. I'll gain experience and all that. And it's great. I'll brag about participating in such a contest. Why are you talking like you're not going to win? Pearl's got his hands up his sides. Kate, you can do it. If what you wish for could come true, Sam grinned. But thanks for the moral support. Finally, the objects of evaluation by the elite jury were eaten, and the secret voting began, after which the host took the stage. Today here were presented luxurious dishes, colorful and extraordinary, each of which, I'm not afraid to say it, could decorate the menu of any restaurant. But we, unfortunately, must choose only one, the best. And you know, when we just started voting, no one doubted, grinned the host. Who will win? A delicious chocolate fountain. It intertwines the classic traditions of this dessert and its original reading. An author's perspective. We all agreed that this would have been a fair choice on all counts, Well, that's what I thought. Sam lowered his gaze. Yeah, I'm not upset, he said to the wall, already ready to comfort him in every way possible. It's okay. That tough cook should win. But the next moment, when the presenter continued talking, Sam suddenly looked up at the stage in amazement. And the thing was that the host said that yes, the experienced jury members appreciated all the desserts, but there was one among them that impressed them especially, and it was a simple apple charlotte. I think many of us are familiar with this simple pie, which was prepared by our mothers, grandmothers, and aunts, said the host with a smile. It seems that every piece of it warmly resonates in the heart, and so we decided. We were going to judge the dessert fairly after all, which meant we had to take another vote. And so finally, the decision was almost made. The host paused for a spectacular pause and looked around at the breathless audience. Our guest of honor pondered the longest, our dear Antoine. Finally, he made his decision. And in the end, first place is awarded to apple pie. From Sam from Feasers. There was a round of applause and cheers. Sam rounded into a confused stare. Was this really happening to him? But go ahead. I gave him a gentle nudge in the back. Kate, did you deserve that? This is your victory. Let's go for it. Sam went on stage and accepted from the hands of the presenter the award of a gilded plate with a crystal actor, as well as a diploma and another check for a tidy sum as another prize. And now the guy truly realized that this was the happiest evening of his entire past, and so far, his life. And then he looked around the room and stopped at the picture. And suddenly he realized something important. And besides, we expect to cooperate, said the host and owner of the White Swan restaurant, smiling. And although it is not included in the rules of the contest, but I want to make you, Sam, special offers. How about selling this wonderful recipe? It could become the centerpiece of our establishment, a part of the list of dishes that make up, so to speak, its business card. That's a very generous offer, Sam replied. But I don't agree. First of all, I really hope this recipe shows up in Keezers. I think our guests will love it. And secondly, I'm thinking of recording a video of it and putting it online. Let people cook it. Let it be not only in the Café This Pie, but in every kitchen of those who want it. So you can write down the recipe. Shout it out from the audience. Some spectacular blonde in a red dress. How lovely, she continued. An attractive man who can cook. How can you resist? She joked and laughed. Finally, Sam was released from the stage. He received congratulations from all sides, including from the other contestants. And then he stayed a little longer at the celebration. It was necessary purely out of courtesy to talk to so many people. So Sam was not immediately able to approach the wall, and when he did, the girl met him with a frown. "Congratulations," she muttered. "You're a hot commodity, aren't you?" She added sharply, clearly implying that he had just been chatting with a lady owner of a pastry shop, who all coquettishly unobtrusive and yet eloquently touched Sam, and clearly not jokingly asked for lessons in culinary skills, and also beckoned them to work. Yes, what a glory, Sam grinned. All right, squinted Kate. I'll go. Where to? The guy was surprised. Did I do something to offend you? No, it's all right, the girl answered so sharply that anyone would have realized that nothing was wrong with her. Wait a minute. Sam still wanted to say something important, but Kate ran away to the depths of the hall, and then, finding her mom there, told her that she wanted to go home because she had a headache. The next few days passed for Sam in a pleasant fog. He was still reliving the aftertaste of his victory, but there was something else that kept him busy, and he decided he had to act. "Hi," Kate said to him as she opened the door. It didn't surprise her that he knew her address. "I invited him to visit once, but Sam declined. What's up? Did something happen at work?" "No," he answered and handed her a bouquet of pink rose lollipops. "These are for you." "Cute," Kate said, and she looked like she'd been given a mop instead of flowers. "Not for nothing. I hate flowers." "Liar," Sam grinned. "Roses are your favorite. You said so yourself. All right, come on in." The girl stepped aside, letting him through. "Since you're here, we need to talk." "Yeah, we've talked 100 times. Kate's going to get some water in a vase." "What do you want?" "You know what I mean?" No. Look, if I don't want to, I love you. How did she not drop the vase too? Her hands were weak as soon as she heard the cherished words, but instead she put the vase neatly on the table. Then she put the bouquet in it, and only then did she step toward the guy. She stood up and raised her head, meeting his gaze. Say it again. I said I love you for real. How else could you say it? For a few minutes, they just stared at each other. Then Kate laughed happily and threw herself around his neck. I also want you to marry me, Sam added. You're quick. She smiled and kissed him for the first time herself. They would have said 1,000 more important words to each other. But at that moment, the doorbell rang. Kate, opening the door and seeing her mom, hurried to share her joy. Mom, I'm getting married. Oh, that's all I could do. To begin with, Nancy said, walking into the house. Standing behind her were Kate's grandparents. And here was someone else she hadn't expected to be here at all. Antoine, Grandpa said sweetly. Just like that, out of the house for a little while. I don't know what's going on here. Who are you marrying? That's him. Kate grabbed her hand, looked out of the room, indignant. Sam, I told you about him. I'm very happy for you, daughter, Nancy said. That's just wonderful. Mom asked Kate, what's wrong? Are you different? Let me get this straight. Mademoiselle. Antoine stepped forward, and in the next few minutes it became clear that love at first sight had broken out between him and Nancy, and with such force that Antoine, having lived as a bachelor for the last almost 20 years, he suddenly decided not only to have an affair, but to marry Nancy. He gave her a diamond ring, and also to be serious and solid. Has already managed to get acquainted with her parents, and they approved such a candidate for a future son-in-law. Besides, Antoine decided that if he found a bride here, he would settle down in this town too. And here, as planned, we'll open a restaurant. That's great news for one day. That's right. Maybe my future son-in-law will even work in our family restaurant one day. What do you think? Sam was a little confused. He replied that he would think about it later. But for now, he was just happy. And he still had a lot to talk about with the cute picture. Benjamin, I don't think we can do this, Vanessa said. They'd just gone over the estimates they prepared, and the pile of paperwork needed to open a second Caesar's Cafe for the umpteenth time. I remember when we started, you said the same thing, grinned her husband. Don't worry, we'll make it work. All right, Vanessa sighed. I trust you. They were silent for a while, immersed in studying the documentation. Benjamin, we need to talk, and this can't wait. He rubbed his eyes tiredly with his fingers. It would be good to get it done today. We have to pick a place to rent tomorrow. Since when is work more important to you than your wife and family? Vanessa frowned. Benjamin blinks confusedly. Honey, are you offended? It's just that this is important to you and me. And no, of course, it's not more important to me. But just tell me what's going on. You haven't been the same lately. What's the same, but a little cranky? He grinned at Archie. Do you have a lot of mood swings? You used to be a whirlwind, but now you're tired all the time. I'm already worried. Are you sick? No, I'm healthy, Vanessa replied. But something is really going on with me, but I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I thought we trusted each other. You just told me yourself. So what's going on with you? Remember when you said that all change has its time, and sometimes something new can hurt? I remember, Benjamin nodded. That's what I said when you offered to buy a cottage. But you see, you and I don't have enough time for it, and it will be overgrown with weeds. Benjamin, I didn't mean the cottage. Vanessa started pacing nervously around the room. Then she stopped and either laughed or sobbed. I just don't know how to tell you to believe it. But I've been to several doctors already, and they confirmed it. Doctors. So you were sick after all. Benjamin jumped up, walked over to his wife, and wrapped his arms around her. We'll get through this. Trust me. Of course we will, quietly poked Vanessa. In about 7 months. Why is Benjamin confused about 7 months? What are you talking about? How confused are you? Think about it. Vanessa lowered her eyes. It's just that I've been pregnant for 2 months. So that makes it 7 more to go. Pregnant. Benjamin could hardly believe his ears. But we were told. The doctor said that sometimes there are changes in a person's body. Well, it was a small possibility. But it did happen. Benjamin, aren't you glad? I forgive you for saying mean things about me. It's just that you're pregnant and therefore a little nervous. He hugged her even tighter and kissed her. No, I'm glad. I'm happy. This is the most wonderful thing that could have happened to us.
Subscribe and click the bell. He often had nightmares. He wakes up in the night in a cold sweat. Something is troubling him. The boy gets out of bed, goes to the stairwell, looks around. No one's there. He walks down the stairs. It's business as usual. And when he gets outside, he sees that there's been an apocalypse. Everything's destroyed. The houses have been turned into piles of bricks. There's no one on the street. There's someone peeking around the corner. With some sixth sense, the boy realizes it's not a person. He jumps out of his seat and runs back into the entryway. But now there are only stairs. There are no walls. The boy screams, and at that moment he wakes up. Son, what's wrong? Mom's awake too. It was just a bad dream. He was still sitting on the bed, confused. It seemed like everything he'd just seen was true. Come on, get to bed for school tomorrow. The woman muttered. Okay. The boy agreed with her, although he didn't really want to do it. He went back to bed, fell asleep, and the dream seemed to go on. It was scary, but he couldn't wake up. The next day, Christopher got up in the morning, exhausted. He couldn't pull himself together. He really wanted to sleep, but the kid went to school anyway. He knew if he didn't, his parents wouldn't be happy. The family lived in an ordinary town. Christopher had a sister. The birth father was long gone. His mother lived with her new husband, who was the boy's stepmother. Mom, are we going to take a little longer walk with the boys tonight? Asked the son in the evening. What's the matter? The woman looked at him. Oh, he just shrugged his shoulders. I don't know what to say. All weekend, please, but not during the week. The woman was stern. All right, we all don't like these lectures. He went out to the yard, told his friends that it wasn't going to work out today. They were meeting at one of the houses in their neighborhood. The young people there had taken over the basement. Now, when they studied already in the 8th grade, they couldn't smoke and drink beer. But back then, they had to walk around a lot longer to get the air out. Then we'll sit here, showed Stephen to a bench in the yard. Great. No one argued with him. Why go anywhere when everyone lives nearby? There was no ringleader in the group. Everyone was on an equal footing. It was the 90s, so young people did what they could. We'd go out on the weekend, the man would say. Of course, it was a favorite. If we were lucky, guys from another neighborhood would come over. We could wave. Stephen said, yeah, we'd have to get ready. Christopher remembered the last time the opponents had brass knuckles. All they could come up with was a rock for insulation. Don't teach a scientist, his comrade told him. In those years, young people did not think of anything else. There was practically nowhere to go. All the circles ended in the afternoon, and in the evening the boys were left to themselves. They gathered together, discussed a plan of action, took money somewhere, bought cheap alcohol, drank it at construction sites or abandoned. Hey, Christopher. One day, an older comrade came up to the guy. Hi. Looked at him. It was Rick. He graduated 2 years ago, and now he was looking for intrepid youngsters. Come on, let's step back. We need to talk. He knew Christopher was not a shy guy and could do a lot of things. Christopher looked back at his friends and followed his older comrade. Of course, it was a little scary because he knew what Rick was doing, but it was embarrassing in front of his friends if he didn't go. The young men rounded the corner of the building, and Rick looked around and handed Christopher 2 matchboxes. What are these? The boy did not understand then. You don't know? Rick winked at him. I guess, Christopher told him. Well, if you guess, you probably know what to do with it, smirked the older man. Roughly, Christopher quickly stashed what he had just been handed in his pocket. You hand it over, you'll get some good money. There was a piece of paper that said who to hand it all over to. Okay, the boy walked back towards the school. He didn't look back at Rick. At first it was very scary, because Christopher was afraid that someone would see or find out what he was doing. But once, twice, 3 times, and then he felt at ease, because not only did he have good money, but he also hung around in circles with the older guys. Knew if anybody took offense, you could just tell them, and they'd stand up for him. "Christopher, are you coming or not?" Stephen called out to him, but he had to wait for the bell to ring and hand over what was in his pocket. "Wait a minute," the young man waved him away. "Listen, tell me, why have you been so different lately?" A friend came up to him. "Let me tell you everything later. It's just not the right time." The guy didn't want to share information with anyone because he was afraid that everything would come out. Over the weekend, they met up with Rick again. He handed him some matchbooks. "There's more than enough here." Christopher looked at the one. "I won't be in for a while. So if they ask, you can sell it," said Rick to him. "I hear you." They parted ways. Christopher came home. There were 2 boxes in his pocket. They were straight up igniting his pants all the way through. The boy knew that if his mother found these in his pants, nothing good would come of it. In the evening, he went for a walk. He met Stephen in the yard. "Listen, friend, I have something very important to tell you." Christopher came up to him. "Go ahead." A friend was always willing to listen. "Do you remember Rick, who approached me at school?" he asked him. "Of course I remember," smiled Stephen. So Christopher began to tell him what was going on. "Do you want something from me?" Stephen stood. He was in complete shock. He had no idea that there was such a thing going on at the school. "Here, you can hide this at your house or something." He took the boxes out of his pocket. Wow, he opened one of them. "Close it, or you'll wake up." He kept looking around. He was afraid that someone might see them. "Listen, why don't we try it?" Stephen smiled. "I don't even know." "Then we'd have to invest the money," the guy shrugged. "All right, let's lay down." "It's not that expensive," said his friend. That afternoon, a group of guys gathered in their den. In theory, they knew how it was done, so it wasn't anything complicated. Christopher took a drag. He didn't feel anything like that. It even felt to him like normal cigarettes. Afterward, when the boys went home, they felt a little dizzy. And no matter what anyone says now, it seemed ridiculous. The boy came home, saying something, giggling. The mother suspected something wrong. She began to question her son, but he remained silent, said nothing. Then the next day, the woman called a policeman she knew and shared her suspicions with him. He offered to hold a preventive conversation on the topic that was worrying all parents now. But he also said that the mother should not warn anyone. Let the son not know, he would think it was a stranger to no one. And so it was agreed. In the evening, when Christopher came home, they had a policeman sitting in the kitchen. "Hello." I looked at him, and his knees were shaking. He now thought he had done the right thing when he gave Stephen the box. Passing Christopher, "I am waiting for you," the man told him. Christopher walked into the kitchen, sat down across from him. He didn't look up. He was really scared that he was about to start talking, and his mom and everyone else would find out what he was doing. "So, young man from the school has received a signal that you are doing the wrong things, and you need to have a preventive conversation with you. So here I am," said the man. "Was he writing something in his notebook?" "I didn't do anything like that," Christopher began to mumble. But then I thought, the more you get lost, the more they'll think of you. So he shut up. "I'm not accusing you of anything yet," the man in uniform smirked. "Then why did you come?" The boy didn't understand. The mother stood near him and saw that her son was not comfortable. "I told you, it's a preventive conversation. Everyone knows that there are a lot of illegal substances now. They are distributed among school children and other residents of our city. I just want you to know that if you suddenly get into a company where they do it, or even worse, start using or distributing, then nothing good awaits you in the future," said the policeman. I understood. Christopher shook his head. He really understood that it was very dangerous, And if he kept doing it, someone would find out or he would get caught. 2 days later, when they met Rick, we all told him so. And no amount of money, no amount of persuasion could make him keep doing it now. The boy wanted to finish 9 grades and leave school. But in the past, all parents were in favor of their child necessarily completing a full school course, that is, 11 grades, and then go to good educational institutions. No, my dear, you study all the years, you will get a certificate. And when you turn 18, then, please, decide everything for yourself and do what you want, his mother told him. But why waste 2 years? Christopher didn't understand. I think you will waste them that way if you even leave school. The mother was worried about her son. Now that Christopher had his own opinions, he often argued with his mother because their views were very different from each other. The young man was fascinated by computer technology. He was constantly collecting, disassembling, looking at how everything is organized, trying to do something new. When he was in his senior year of high school, he already realized that he could assemble and disassemble a computer, as well as fix it. So maybe that's what you'll do with your life, his mother told him. I haven't decided yet, he answered her. It's just that I see you're good at it. She stood and watched her son at the table as he deftly went through the parts and put one to the other. Yes, okay, I'll think about it, he promised his mother. He only had one friend left at school now. That was Stephen. Almost everyone from the yard had moved away. They'd gone to school. They talked lightly about the future, how and what would happen. Now we'll finish school and they'll take us to the army, Christopher said. So he served normally. We'll come back, then we'll start working, said Stephen. That's what they decided. After that, they started to think of something to do. There were a lot of ideas, but it was all wrong. They needed money for one thing and money to start another. They also needed equipment to buy. Then the guys threw some plans on a sheet of paper and decided to think about it later. And suddenly something would change, and they would have a down payment for their startup. And now it was time for exams, which were easily passed because the guys never had any problems with their studies. Only graduation was ahead. On this festive day, the mother was very worried. The suit was the dinner. She had the dress ready. And here her son is standing at the graduation. He is given a certificate. Now the school principal says farewell words that they are releasing the guys into free sailing, almost right before graduation. Christopher turned 18, so it was not far off to receive a summons to the military enlistment office. And it came. Now the guy had to pass a medical examination and then go to the army. At least they would send him somewhere not far away, said the mother, who was upset for the child. Don't worry as if I'm still a kid, Christopher told her. And you will always be little to me. His mother hugged him. Even though he didn't like all that tenderness, he didn't push her away. The day came when the guy was sent off to the army. Some acquaintances and friends gathered, and the next day he was on his way to the station. Son, right, his mother said to him and cried. I will, he told her, smiled, and entered the car. Christopher was not at all worried. It was not the first time he had encountered difficulties. He even wanted to know what would happen next, where he would arrive, who would meet him, and how things would be. Everything went well, just as the mother wanted. The son was sent not so far from home. When the oath was administered, she just took the 4:00 bus, and she was already at the location where Christopher was serving. Yes, at first it was difficult for the boy. He had to get into a new team. Everyone has their own habits, their own opinions. And of course, arguments with the old employees. Nobody canceled that. After 6 months of service, everything was normal. Christopher continued to serve. It was already time for demobilization. He missed home very much. When he went there, he was even worried. He went to a flower store, bought a bouquet for his mom. Hello, dear. A woman hugged him at the entrance. Mom, I'm so tired and I miss you. I want something homemade. He told her. Sure enough. Now off she went to the kitchen. That day and the next few were wonderful. I liked everything here. He remembered a lot of things, looking out the window. They used to run with their friends in this yard. And another mom, do you know where Stephen is now? He asked the woman after a week at home. How would I know? I don't keep track of him. Did she look at him? What so aggressively? Didn't understand the woman's mood. Nothing. She went to the kitchen. In fact, the woman had already gone to work for a day and thought that the son does nothing, but just sits at home. And yet the young man followed her into the kitchen. Christopher, you've been sitting at home for over a week now. Why don't you get a job somewhere? And she looked at him seriously. What are you starting? Get a job when you need one. He shook his head, realizing that everything was starting over. And when that time would come, she wondered. Mom, don't start. He went back to the room. They were not interested. The young man didn't want to work in a factory or for some uncle. He had a lot of ideas. He wanted to do his own thing. It was necessary to find Stephen because Christopher was sure that the two of them could do a lot of things together. The next day, the young man got ready. He decided to go to Stephen, and if he couldn't find him, at least ask his parents where he was. Hello. He arrived at his friend's house. Oh, Christopher, hello. Stephen's mom hugged him. Where's my best friend? He asked her. And he went to the village to help his grandmother, said the landlady. And when will he be home? He asked. I don't even know. And you go to his place, you'll have a rest there. His mother dictated the address where his grandmother lived. Thank you. Christopher didn't mind seeing his friend. He went straight from here to the train station. He didn't bother to warn his mother. An adult already does what he wants. The trip only took about an hour. Then it was a few minutes' walk to the right house. And here the boy is already knocking on the window. He saw his friend, who pulled back the curtains, looked, and as if he could not believe that a friend had come to see him. What are you looking at? Open up. Christopher laughed. No way. Then Stephen shouted and disappeared through the window. A few seconds later, the gate opened, and a guy came out. Didn't you recognize me? Christopher asked his comrade. They hugged each other. How can you recognize how long we have not seen each other? The young man was happy. Invite me into the house, asked Christopher. Sure, let's go. Grandma just baked pies. They went into the yard and then into the house. They sat down at the table. The woman poured them tea, put in the center huge dishes with pies, wished them a pleasant appetite, and went behind a curtain into another room. Well, how's it going? Tell me. Christopher took a bite of the cake. Everything's fine. I'm waiting for you. Lots of plans. Stephen smiled. Well, here I am. Christopher spread his arms out. All right, let's get started. We just need to think about housing. With my parents do not want to live like that, complained Comrade. Great, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Christopher rejoiced. After all, two to rent a place is easier than one. Ugh, and I thought I could not afford it. Stephen exhaled. No, everything will be fine, assured his friend. That was the deal. The friends decided to spend a few days here in the village and then go to the city and start doing something. I'm so glad we haven't lost touch, Christopher said as they drove back to the city. It's okay. Stephen shook his head. He remembered from his childhood what an inventor and initiator Christopher was. I hope so. The boy agreed with him. Christopher arrived home. He thought his mother was going to throw herself at him and start asking him where he had been, why he hadn't warned her. But nothing of the sort happened. Did you go for a walk? Was all she asked when the young man entered the apartment. He didn't say anything. He went into the room, took out a sports bag, and started packing. That's a long way to go. Mom walked in the same way. We're from Stephen and decided to rent an apartment, he told her. Great. As if the woman was even happy. She went back into the kitchen. But all the while he was standing in the hallway, thinking that his mom would at least come out to him. Come on. shouted the one from the kitchen. He went to a friend, who had to ask an acquaintance who rented the apartment whether it is still there or already rented. Zdorova. Well, he asked Stephen. Everything is fine. The apartment is not yet rented, so you can move in right now, said the friend Christopher. Great. He smiled. They took some of Stephen's things and went to the place where they were going to live. After that, the friends sat down at the table to talk about what they wanted to do now. The guys came up with a very good idea with discs and audio cassettes. They were now calculating what they would need. Knowing that my uncle has a basement space, I don't think he needs it. We'll have to ask, Stephen said. If this works out, we'll have very little cost, said Christopher to a friend. And it did work out for the boys. The uncle gave them this little space in the basement. They bought, copied equipment, discs, paper. Everything was gonna work out, everything. And somewhere he took an old computer. He said he gave it to them cheap, but with God. They opened up and began to place ads wherever they could. On the third day, they got a very large order. Guys, hello. A respectable man came to them. Hello. The guys didn't expect this. They thought it would be a one-off. But to do it all at once, I don't know if your work is good or bad, but I have a very urgent order. The customer looked at the surprised guys. Are you talking? Christopher was the first to speak. I have several 1,000 discs. They all need to be processed in 3 days. He said that a few 1,000. Christopher grinned and looked at the equipment they had. I'll give you an advance payment. Anything you say. Just do it, please, the man asked. It was obvious that the matter was urgent. Okay, just let's discuss some points. He looked at his friend Christopher, who was still silent. That's it. What do you say? The customer was in agreement. After that, Christopher explained to him what and how. Good, and here is the money he took out of his pocket. A solid sum put on the table. Bring the discs and see you in 3 days. Christopher said goodbye to him. Have you been making noise for 3 days? Stephen jumped on him. What's the big deal? He didn't understand. You can't do it in a week, especially with our equipment. The comrade almost cried. Calm down. He left us so much money for them. We'll buy a normal machine. Spoke Christopher with knowledge. And if we fail? Stephen did not believe in his own strength. It'll be okay. We'll get through this, Christopher promised him. I don't know. The friend doubted. From that moment on, they began to work hard. They decided to work both day and night. At first one would go out, the other would sleep, then they would switch. On the third day, they really had everything ready. The customer arrived. He was afraid that it would turn out like with the past performers. He had already given this order to others, but as time passed, when he arrived, he was simply told they couldn't do the job. Guys. He walked in without a greeting and looked at those who worked in this basement. Yes, hello. Come on in. Stephen was cheerful today because he realized that they had done a very difficult job. Did you make it in time? The man looked at them. Of course we did. I promised. Christopher stood up and pointed to the boxes that stood in the corner. First, the customer looked at everything, hummed, shook his head, and paid the rest of the money to the guys. And plus, he added a thank you for the speed. Bye. We'll definitely come to you again. He winked at the guys and called the workers to take the boxes away. Wow, Stephen looked at the money. There was enough here to pay several months' rent. And there was still a decent chunk left over. Well, let's get on with it. I held out my hand to him. Sure, laughed his friend and partner. Today the guys decided to relax a little, go to a cafe and celebrate the completion of a successful deal. Beer? Asked the bartender when they walked in. Thank you, nodded the guys and went to the table. Both of them were in high spirits. They sat and discussed further plans. Toward evening, more people started coming to the cafe. Soon there was not a single free seat left. At that moment, 2 girls entered the hall. They looked around since there were no seats, approached the bar. Wait, Stephen stopped them. He looked at the girls. He thought of something. It became interesting, who now he got up from the table and went to the bar. There he talked to the girls about something. They laughed, and then he and the guy came back to their table. Hi. They looked at Stephen. One took a seat next to the topic, and the other sat down with Stephen. Saw that there was no seat available for them. So that's why he offered to join us, the guy explained to his friend. I see. Until then, Stephen could not understand how it had happened so quickly. Introductions. I'm Sophia, and this is my girlfriend Camille, said one of the girls. Nice to meet you. You already know me. And this is my friend Stephen. Introduced him Christopher. Well, maybe we'll have a beer too. The girls looked at each other. Sure, we're having a party tonight. The friends told them about their deal. Wow, you could tell they were interested. After that, they went for a walk around the city, and when they said goodbye, the guys invited the girls to visit. They'd promised to come the very next day in the rented apartment of the guys. There were 4 people sitting in the kitchen. How about a game of cards and a couple on a couple? Stephen asked. Why not? I'm with Camille, said Christopher and winked at her. I agree. The girl smiled back and blushed. She liked the guy. Back then at the cafe, they were dealt the cards and the game began. Guys and girls were laughing, saying something. It was clear that Stephen and Sophia also liked him. In the evening, the friends separated. Each went to see the girl home. When they came home, they shared their impressions. The next day after work, the company gathered again. It went on like this every night. Girls, why are we all going back and forth with you? Move in with us, said Stephen after 2 months of acquaintance. What if you don't mind? Camille was looking at Christopher. So Stephen and Sophia started living in one room, and Christopher and Camille in the other. At first, everything was very good, friends working together, girlfriends studying together, and doing everything at home together. But after 2 years of living together, the girls started telling their boyfriends to move out. Everyone wanted something different. We're gonna live like this for a long time. We need to start a family, Camille told Christopher in the room. You realize it's going to be a strain on our budget. Her boyfriend convinced her otherwise. I can't do that. Sophia doesn't want to either. The girl took offense. The guys went on about their business. But as time goes on, things change. And what they were doing was no longer in demand. Now orders were coming in, but they were many times less. Accordingly, the income from it was small. Once I got a call from a friend who lived in another city. It was not far away, and it was many times smaller than where the guys lived and worked now. Hi. Christopher greeted him. Listen, I decided to call you because I know you're good at this. Started telling John why he was calling. But he didn't understand anything yet. Christopher decided to open a repair shop here. Computers, cell phones, other appliances. You're good at that. Spoken with enthusiasm, friend. So do I. What do you want? I'm starting to get a little more up to speed. Christopher. Come, we'll work together. We don't have anything like this yet. And people break things all the time. There was so much enthusiasm in the young man's voice, I'd have to think about it. Christopher asked for some time. Yes, of course. I can't stand you, agreed the friend. After this conversation, the guy thought about it. Yes, it was a great option to make money, but it was necessary to leave here in a small town. What to do? He didn't know. Camille, I need to talk to you, he said to the girl. Go ahead. She looked at him. Remember you said we should separate. I want to offer you an option. He told her everything that his friend had suggested to him, that he go to some backwater. She cringed. There you can rent an apartment cheaper, and the income will be decent. He persuaded the girl. I don't know. I don't want to. She almost stomped her feet. Well, think about it. I'll probably definitely go. He went to Stephen to tell him the same thing. His friend didn't support him either. He said that if he wanted to go, he could leave and he could stay here. Christopher didn't realize that he was the only one in his head thinking that everything would work out, and what difference did it make what city to live in. 2 weeks later, he called John. said that he had decided everything and would soon come to look for an apartment for him. The friend was happy, agreed, and said he was looking forward to it. "Christopher, I'm pregnant." In the evening, Camille surprised him. "I'm glad." He smiled. "What to do now?" "I wasn't going to go anywhere." She was almost crying. "Why didn't you say so before? I thought we were together." He sat down in front of her. "I don't." She shrugged her shoulders. "Are you going to go?" He looked her in the eyes. What to say now? She couldn't accept the thought. Stephen regretted that he would have to part with his friend, but the latter had already decided everything. They saw their friends off to the train station, but all for now. "Come and visit," Christopher said and shook his friend's hand. The girls said goodbye too. John, as promised, rented them an apartment, so now the couple had already arrived there. They settled in quickly. Christopher and John started working, just as the friend had said they would. There were tons of people. Everyone had something broken, and they were carrying the workshop to them. The money was very good. Camille stayed home. She was getting ready to be a mother. What's there to do in this little town? Not even anywhere to go. The girl was always teaching. "Nothing. Now you will give birth. Then we will find something to do," Christopher reassured her. He took care of Camille as best he could, bought what she asked for. He did almost everything himself. When the due date came, the girl went to the hospital. There were no problems. The labor went perfectly. 5 days later, the happy father met them at the hospital. "Why don't you propose to me?" Camille asked him one night. "Why do you feel so bad?" He looked at her in surprise. "We have a child. It's time to become a family," she replied. "No, I don't want to. Why do I need an extra stamp in my passport?" He answered her easily. "Then you don't love me." She folded her arms across her chest and turned away from him. "Please don't start." He didn't like all these concerts. Right now, Camille was at home with the baby. Christopher was working. The daughter was already 5 years old when Camille started talking about the wedding again. "Why are you bothering me with this proposal?" The young man was annoyed. "I want a wedding," she told him. "I don't." He was getting even more annoyed. "Then I'm going to leave." She gave him a wait and see look. "What do you expect? That I'll talk you out of it or run out to buy a ring?" He grinned. They'd been fighting a lot lately. Camille had been the one to stir it up. And now that she said she was leaving, Christopher didn't mind. "That's it, I'm going to my mom's and you won't see the baby." She turned and walked away. "What makes you think that?" Was surprised by the young man. He realized that the girl was trying to hurt him. "And what have you done for her?" Camille stopped, realizing what had hurt him. "Did you, Christopher, have a right to ask that question?" From the moment she was born, he had sat by Evelyn's crib almost every night, putting her to bed. Then, when her teeth started teething, he rocked her in his arms. Then he took the girl to kindergarten, practiced, taught her to read, count, write. Camille at this time not only did not work anywhere, but she disappeared all day at the girlfriend's, which she had here appeared, or at the beauty parlor. "All of this is my last word." She went into the bathroom and slammed the door. Christopher went to his daughter's room. He just wanted to talk to her. Of course, if there had been no Evelyn, this breakup would not have been so painful. Now the father walked over to Evelyn, beckoned her over and hugged her. "Daddy, what's wrong? Why are you so sad?" she asked him. "Your mom and I had a fight and now she wants to take you away to Grandma's house." "Don't worry, sometimes that happens between adults, but you and I will always be in touch." He pulled her even tighter against him. "Good." The girl cried. She felt sorry for her daddy and mommy. The very next day, Camille with her belongings and daughter left. Christopher was at work at that moment. In the evening, when he came back and found no one, he felt very bad. He went down to the yard, went to the store, got himself a beer. Now he sat in the kitchen, poured the amber liquid into a glass and drank. There was nothing to be sad about except his daughter. He drank, felt very tired, got up and went to bed. No one was bothering him today. There was no need to go anywhere, to do anything. So he just closed his eyes and fell asleep. The young man began to live alone. It might have seemed difficult at first. You had to cook, go to work, clean. But soon he got used to it. Now he had a lot of free time. He began to work not only in the workshop, but also at home. "Hi," John greeted him at work. "How are you?" Christopher asked him. "I'm fine. Come and visit tonight." It was Saturday. John and his wife were going to stoke the bathhouse. The guy had long dreamed of a private house and had finished building it about 6 months ago. John was most proud of his bathhouse. It turned out to be big. That's where they gathered. Of course, there is nothing to do at home anyway. And you want to talk to someone. Christopher agreed. They had worked today and decided that they would go straight from here to the store and go to John. "What are we drinking?" The friend looked at Christopher. "Beer, what else do you drink in a bathhouse?" He was already putting glass bottles in the basket. "Great." The man agreed with him. They arrived while John's wife was cooking something in the house. The young men flooded the bathhouse, brought water and firewood, and decided that they would also make a kebab. Well, here came the treat. A girl came to the bathhouse. "Thank you, my dear." John sat his wife on his knee. "Now Jenna will also come," said the girl. "Good." Christopher winked at his host. It had been about 6 months since Camille had broken up with him, but Christopher didn't want to meet or date anyone yet. "Aha," he replied. Jenna burst in like a hurricane. She started talking from the door, laughing. "Let's get to know each other." "This is my friend Christopher," said to her John. "Hi." She smiled at him. Christopher did not like such animals, and the girl was not to his taste. All evening they talked. He even walked her home. But he couldn't say he wanted to keep talking to her. "Hi." He saw her the next day. A message from Jenna on social media writing. He told John at the time. "What is writing and who is interested in that one?" Jenna emotionally said the young man. "So answer," suggested his friend. "I don't want to." Christopher waved his head. "Okay, it's up to you." Did not pry into the affairs of a friend John. The next day, when Christopher was going to work, he again received the same message as yesterday from the girl. And again, he didn't react to it. And again, he didn't react to it. "How's it going?" a friend at work asked. "Nothing new." He shrugged. An hour later, Jenna came to their workshop. John had gone somewhere else, so as much as Christopher didn't want to, he had to approach the girl. "You can look at my phone." She handed him the device in her hand. Now he spun it around, pressed some buttons, realized she'd made up a reason to come over. It was just the sound. He gave her the phone back. "Thank you. How much do I owe you?" Jenna tried to make conversation. Not at all. The guy realized he hadn't done anything at all. "Why don't you want to communicate with me?" she asked directly. "Who told you that?" He wasn't looking at her, minding his own business, and I could see she wasn't going to leave. "Oh, Jenna, hi. John's back." "Hi. Come visit tonight." She called them over to John. "Okay, what's the holiday?" asked the young man. "Nothing. We'll just sit around." She smiled. "It's Monday," said Christopher with a chuckle. "So?" The girl didn't understand. "Let's wait until the weekend then." Then said John, "Okay." She looked at Christopher one more time and went to your place. "She did." The guy guessed. "Yes, she did," Christopher said grudgingly. "What's wrong with her?" "She's a nice girl." His friend didn't understand. "That's it. I don't want to talk about it." Christopher got up and went to the store to buy something to eat. Okay, John stayed out of his way. Jenna kept up with him. She texted Christopher every day to say hello. They met when they went to John's house to visit. So far, Christopher hadn't paid any attention to her. One day, the girl went to the store, and on her way back, she saw Christopher. I yelled hi. He came up to her hi. "Help me carry the bag," she asked him. "Come on," he agreed out of politeness. When they reached the girl's house, she thanked the guy. "Why don't you come over for a visit?" she asked him. "No," was the unequivocal answer. "Let's go and talk, drink tea." "What, are you going to run away from me like this?" she called out to him. Good. He himself at that moment does not know how he agreed and why he went. Jenna inwardly rejoiced. He's definitely not going anywhere now. Today they had tea and talked. Tomorrow come over after work for dinner. She invited him when she went out to see him off. Well, we'll see. He put on his sneakers, said goodbye, and left. At work, he didn't say anything to John in the morning and went home in the evening. "Are you coming over?" Jenna texted him. "I'm sorry, but I can't make it tonight." Christopher texted her back. "I've been working so hard, cooking. It's all for nothing." Even in the message, it was obvious that she was offended. "Okay, I'll be there soon." Christopher thought to himself that in addition to having a delicious meal, he would also spend the evening with an interesting person. Yesterday, when they talked, he realized that Jenna was a smart girl, knew a lot of things, and he liked that. Again, they sat in the girl's kitchen and talked. "Would you like some wine?" she asked him. "No beer," he asked in reply. "I'll look in a moment." She opened the refrigerator. "No, only champagne and wine." She looked at the young man. "Okay, let's have wine." He agreed. "We can go to the store," Jenna suggested. "Would you go with me?" asked her boyfriend. She didn't care what she did, as long as she was near him. "Then let's go." They went to the hallway, put on their shoes, and left the apartment. Not half an hour later, the young people were sitting in the room on the couch in front of the TV and drinking beer. Jenna was telling something, and they were laughing. At some point, their faces were so close that the girl couldn't stand it. "Let's kiss," she told him. Christopher did not answer anything. He put his arms around the girl, and their lips merged in a kiss. An hour and 2 hours passed, and they kept kissing and kissing. "Are you a good kisser?" Christopher said to her then. "Are you too?" She lowered her eyes. "Stay." "No, not tonight." He looked at his watch and started to get ready to go home. "Okay, will you come tomorrow?" she asked, but she wasn't hoping for anything. "Yes," he nodded. When Christopher walked out of the apartment, Jenna leaned with her back against the door and lit the sea. It was the first time a girl had ever pursued a young man on her own, and she had succeeded. The next day, she got ready, cooked dinner, bought beer, wine. Who knows what he'd want? And the young man came, as promised. "Hi." Jenna was very shy. She couldn't even approach him. "You've been waiting." He realized by the aroma coming from the kitchen. "Yep," she nodded. "Tonight went the same way as yesterday. Why don't you stay in tonight?" Jenna asked him. "You know, you and I have just started hanging out. Let's hang out for a while," smiled Christopher. "Okay," agreed the girl, because she didn't want to spoil the already very fragile relationship. The next day, Christopher wrote that he would not be able to come. Jenna tried to ask why, but he never explained anything. By the weekend, she texted that she was going to visit John. To everyone, he told them that he was invited too. They met again and went home together in the evening. And tonight he didn't even have to be persuaded. He stayed with the girl. Of course, they slept in separate rooms, and when Jenna woke up in the morning, she didn't know whether to approach him or not. What to do? Embarrassed, like she was 13 years old, the girl went to the kitchen, made coffee, then she made breakfast. When it was ready, she put it on the coffee table and went to wake up the young man. "Hi, everybody." She sat down on the couch where he was sleeping. "Good morning. How long has he been wiping his eyes? You should be off to work by now." Jenna knew that guys worked without a day off, so she woke him up. "Yeah, I'm getting up now," he said. "I made you breakfast." Jenna blushed for some reason, embarrassed. "Thank you. I'll go to the kitchen now." Christopher got up from the couch. He walked down the hall, and Jenna noticed that he was somehow skidding to the right side. He washed his face, had breakfast, told Jenna he would stop by again after work and left. She was happy about it. She couldn't believe that they were actually starting a relationship. The girl got everything ready again. She had the day off today, so there was plenty of time. She waited for Christopher and wondered what they would do tonight. "Let's go to the movies." She met him on the doorstep of her apartment. "Well, if you want to have dinner, we'll go," he agreed. And they all did. And after they returned from the theater, sat for a while, shared their impressions of the film, and then went to bed again. For a whole week, Christopher went to Jenna's, stayed with her, but they slept in separate rooms. "Why don't you come to bed with me?" The girl asked him one night. "I don't know. Are you going to name it?" "You don't lie down," he answered. "But I'm calling it tonight," she said, and her cheeks flared again. Good. They were now sitting in the kitchen, and as Christopher got up and walked down the hall, Jenna noticed again that he was skidding to the right. At first, the girl paid no attention to it and didn't say anything to him. But about a month after they started living together, Christopher admitted that his right ear really hurts. Sometimes he even feels like he can't hear it. "Why don't you go to the doctor?" Jenna asked him. "Do you know these doctors? They don't say anything, but they give you prescriptions, and nothing really helps." He waved her off. "Well, at least let them do an exam. Figure out why it's happening," she told him. "No, I'm definitely not going to the doctors," the young man replied. "All right. As you wish," she shrugged. But when after another short time Christopher came home, he told Jenna a terrible story. At work, he wanted to listen to music, but since their workshop was not alone, he put on headphones, and when the music started, Christopher could hear with his left ear, but not with his right. The guy thought it was the headphones, so he took them off, switched them around. But they turned out to be fine. So he plugged his left ear and asked John to say something to him. The young man could see from his lips that his friend was talking, but he couldn't hear what he was saying. "Christopher, how could you? I told you to see a doctor." Jenna was afraid for his health. She called the pay clinic they had in town and wanted to make an appointment to see Laura. But when the receptionist listened to her complaints, she said that it is necessary not to see a lawyer, but a neurologist. "Well, then write me down to a neurologist." She dictated Christopher's first and last name and phone number. When he came home from work in the evening, the girl announced to him that he was not going anywhere tomorrow, but was going to a doctor's appointment. She had already made an appointment for him, and he would be expected there. "Why did you do that? Are you sure I need this?" he said to her then. She answered confidently, and she didn't want any more talk. The next day, Christopher went to the doctor. Jenna was waiting for him at home, worried. He dialed her number and told her that the neurologist had sent him for an MRI, saying that he was 90% sure he had a tumor in his head. Of course, this news really scared the girl. While Christopher was getting home, she called the clinic and made an appointment for an MRI. Naturally, the doctor's words really scared the young man. He agreed to undergo all the procedures after everything was done and the report was received. Christopher and Jenna sat in her kitchen, and both were in shock. The MRI showed that Christopher really had a tumor in his head and urgently needed surgery, since the young man's residence registration was in the city where he was born and lived. They went to the hospital there and checked in. The doctor said that the operation could be done under a quota free of charge. Christopher began to take tests, and 3 days before the operation he went to the hospital. Jenna went home. She took all the phone numbers she needed to find out how the surgery went. All day long, Jenna and Christopher talked on the phone. He would tell her what he was doing, how he was being prepped, what tests he was taking, and everything else. The girl couldn't be home alone, so she went to a close friend of hers. "Don't you want to go to a fortune teller?" she asked her. "Why?" "I don't understand, Jenna. Just maybe she could tell you something." The friend saw how worried the girl was and how you wanted to help her, calm her down. "Do you know anyone?" the girl asked her. "Yes, I do." I nodded my head. "Well, okay, come on," agreed Jenna. They arrived at the woman's house. She asked for a picture and started talking. Jenna listened to her and realized it was all true. But at some point, the woman looked up at her and said that Christopher would die during the operation. That was something the girl couldn't accept. She snatched the picture from her and just walked out of the apartment. Ran home. The girlfriend saw all this, followed her. But Jenna didn't want to see anyone right now. She needed to be alone. The day of the surgery, she was on pins and needles. She wouldn't let go of her cell phone. She was pacing from corner to corner, and she didn't know what was going on. And when 800 hours passed, she knew she was going to be out of surgery. By that time, she started calling all the phones, but some were busy, some did not pick up. One number kept getting disconnected. Jenna could not find a place and realized that now it was too late. She could not go there. All night, Jenna did not sleep. Then in the morning, when it was very early, her phone rang. She saw that it was the number of the surgeon who had done Christopher's operation. "Hello," she answered. "Hello, Jenna," he said to her. Yes, she wished he would tell her something faster. "Please come over. I need to talk to you," he replied. "Tell me what's wrong with Christopher." That was the only question she cared about at that moment. "Please come. I'll tell you everything." He sounded like he was pitying her or something. "Can you at least tell me what condition he's in?" She was already crying. "I don't have time for this. When you get here, I'll tell you everything and show you." He hung up. Jenna started looking at the bus schedule. She was packing very fast. She still had 2 hours to go. On the bus, she looked out the window and was afraid that now she was not following a living person. The fortune teller's words that he should die on the operating table came to mind. And somehow it all matched up. The girl arrived at the hospital. She went in to see the surgeon. He was sitting at the table, and he wouldn't look at her. So we told him before the surgery that the facial nerve might be affected. And it was. He also stopped talking. Jenna stood around the table. She knew she was going to pass out. "Doctor." "Well, speak up. Don't be silent anymore." She couldn't take it. During the 8-hour surgery, he had a stroke on the 5th hour. We had to do a second operation. His heart stopped. "Everything is fine now, but your young man is paralyzed on his right side," the surgeon said. "Where is he? Can I see him? What is his condition?" Jenna began to fumble and realized at some point that that was it. Now and then she remembered nothing. She woke up to the smell of ammonia. The doctor was sitting on the floor with her head in his lap. "Don't worry about it. His condition is stable and serious. He's in intensive care now," the doctor said. "Can I see him?" Jenna said quietly. "Of course, the nurse will show you now," calmly spoke the man. As they walked up to the 4th floor, Jenna thought that maybe Christopher would be uncomfortable that she would see him like this, and he wouldn't want her to watch or something. Her legs were shaking, and her whole body was tense. She was put on booties, a cap, gloves, a robe. And when they brought her in, the tears just rolled out of her eyes. "Talk to him. He can hear you," the nurse told her. And Jenna took his hand and just couldn't get any words out because she knew if she did, she would just start sobbing. Christopher was lying on the bed. He was hooked up to a ventilator. There were also various small tubes sticking out of his arms and everywhere else. After standing there for a moment, she realized she couldn't be here anymore. Out. And then in the corridor, she fainted again. "Don't be so worried," the nurse told her. "All right." The girl walked out of the hospital on woozy legs. One thing was for sure, he was alive. And Jenna knew for sure that he would live on. Now every day she would arrive at the hospital in the morning and leave in the evening. At first, while he was in the ICU, Jenna didn't do anything. Just sometimes they'd let her in there. She talked to the person she loved. And then when Christopher was moved to the ICU, Jenna would visit him. She helped him get out of bed, walk the halls. After he was taken off the ventilator, a tube was inserted into his throat. He breathed through it for a while. It was hard, but the girl loved him so much that all the heaviness faded into the background. Christopher could not walk, could not move his arm, and could not speak, because after the tube was taken out of his neck, all the air went out through that hole. You had to cover it with your hand to say anything. Mostly he whispered, but when he tried to say something, it sounded like Darth Vader from Star Wars. He also couldn't close his right eye because his facial nerve was hit. When a month had passed, he was discharged home. Jenna arrived at the hospital. She picked up her favorite person from there. He was in diapers. He couldn't move around on his own. On his legs, his arm wouldn't move at all. His eye could see, but he couldn't blink all the time. The girl brought him home. She knew she had to go to rehab soon. She dropped everything and was only there for him. "Christopher, you and I will be going to rehab soon," she told him. The girl did everything the hospital told her to do. They took pills, gave her some shots. They took a cab to the rehabilitation center, but it did not take them further than the barrier, and Jenna had to carry the young man on her own. She carried him, and they were assigned a room where they had to live together. Every day, Christopher was taken to different procedures, and he really felt better. And when they were discharged after 2 weeks, Jenna took all the recommendations of the doctors. She was given a lot of methodical literature, which described different types of massage, facial articulation, and other procedures. She wasn't going to stop with what she was doing now. When they arrived home, they practiced Christopher on a daily basis. They would say different proverbs, say letters to develop the speech apparatus. Afterward, ideally, they would walk on a bench. But since Jenna didn't have a bench at home, she put a ribbon on the floor, and Christopher had to walk on that tape. The girl took him everywhere, back at the rehab center. The doctor who worked with Christopher advised Jenna to get disability. She found out everything. She gathered all the documents, took the young man there, and they got a group. Now, although Christopher did not work, but some money fell on his card every month. In summer, she left her job and got a job in a health center, which was in Sosnovyj Bor, and took Christopher there with her. Fresh air and exercise had a favorable effect on the young man's condition. So a year passed. By this time, Christopher was already walking on his own. They had almost completely developed his arm. If before it was hanging like a whip, now he could move it, but only the hand remained a problem. Also, Christopher started to speak, but only the eye was a problem. "Good morning, my love. How are you feeling?" Jenna asked him every morning. "Good morning. Fine." He hugged her then. When they arrived from the rehab center, Christopher turned to her and told her, as best he could, that he loved her. Those were the most important words she wanted to hear from a young man. Now that things were more or less working out for him, they were sitting in the kitchen, talking about something. And suddenly, we all took Jenna's hand. "Would you marry me?" he asked her. "Of course," she answered, not doubting anything. "Then you'll be the first person I say those words to." He smiled. Jenna was happy. She just didn't know how to put it into words. "Mom, I'm marrying Simeon," called the girl that same night to her. "Why do you need that invalid?" her mother told her. "You don't understand anything. I love him more than anything in the world. I don't need anyone but him," she said. "Jenna, think 100 times about marrying him," her mother warned her. "I don't have to think about it. I've been ready for it for a long time." The girl didn't listen to anyone. Many friends condemned her that she threw all her strength to restore the young man, said that he was not suitable for her and everything else. But she did not listen to anyone, and when they decided to make a wedding, they just applied. And on the appointed day they came, signed, congratulated each other, and the two of them went to celebrate it all. "I love you very much," pressed Jenna against him. She was ready to be always by his side and never go anywhere. "And you are the love of my life," he told her. They were happy until Jenna got pregnant. When she informed Christopher about it, he was overjoyed with the news. As long as she was working, she was fine. But when she went on maternity leave, and there was practically no income at all, the family began a small scandal. The pension that Christopher received was not enough for anything at all, and it needed a lot. "Are you not going to do anything?" The girl asked her husband, "What do you want me to do?" He asked in reply, "I don't know. You're a man, can't you think of anything?" She was almost crying. "You see, I can't." He was lying on the couch. "Can I? My stomach's churning, and I have to do something and earn money somewhere." The girl was crying. After Jenna gave birth, it was decided that she would go to work and Christopher would stay home with the baby. How can you trust him with a small child? I told her mother off. "Mom, he's a father. He understands everything and knows what to do. Especially he already had a little daughter," said the girl to the woman. "I don't know. If something happens, then blame yourself. You can't fix anything," she told her. "All right, moms, that's enough. I have my own head on my shoulders." Lately, Jenna had become very irritable. Not only did she have a hormonal breakdown, she had to run home every 2 o'clock to feed the baby. Work was taking longer than usual. Christopher didn't just sit at home either. When Emily was still a baby, after Jenna fed her, she would just go to bed. And now that she was 5 months old, she needed to be held in her arms, facing forward all the time. The little girl was realizing the world. Why were the dishes not washed at home again? She'd come in irritated from work. "I'm with the baby all day." "What dishes?" Christopher told her. "And I'm tired all day at work. I'm just trying to make sure there's some income in the house." Jenna yelled at him. It was clear to both of them that they were both tired, but there was no way they could communicate that to each other. Soon after that, when Emily started kindergarten, Christopher would take her in the morning and bring her back in the evening. Yeah, he made Jenna's life easier, but she wasn't idle either. Sometimes she worked Monday through Friday. She worked weekends so she could get double pay, which meant a bigger paycheck. "Why are you sitting on your phone again?" she said to herself. "I can't even sit on my phone anymore." I looked at her. "I don't know. I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of this life. All my nerves are shot," Jenna replied. She would go to the bathroom, close herself up, and sit there, sometimes crying. She really didn't know what to do. Soon Christopher figured out a way for them to make money from the comfort of their own home. They began to make it all a reality. "I'm off to work in the morning," Jenna said. Christopher was taking his daughter to daycare. Jenna was on her way to work, and now she was doing what Christopher had come up with and working in parallel. Money began to appear in the family. Along with it, expensive appliances, computer, TV, laptop, and everything else. The family could afford more now, and Jenna seemed to settle down. But there was more and more work to do. And now it wasn't enough that she was working hard during the day and moonlighting, but there were still things to do at night. "I can't take it anymore. I'll go crazy soon." She was lying next to her husband. He didn't seem to have any problems at all. He slept well at night. He could do it during the day. One day, Jenna received a call from the employment center and was told that one of the organizations required a worker on a quota for a place. Of course, she grasped this information as a straw. Again, she gathered all the documents, came home. "Christopher, I found you a job. Here's the paperwork. Go apply." She handed him a file of papers. Yes, perhaps with this the girl stressed her husband, but she did not know how to do otherwise. All people lived like this. Yes, they pay pennies there. He told her. So what? It's a long service. They'd been together for a few years, and Jenna didn't understand why things had changed so much and why do I need seniority. Christopher didn't understand. All people work. Why do you think you're so special? The girl didn't get it. Now that her daughter was older, Christopher had to do something with her. But on the weekends, they had to take Emily to a singing class, and I had to do something to keep her entertained. Jenna was torn. She cooked at home. Then she'd go out with her daughter, and then she had to go to work. I can't. She came home and lay down on the couch. Get some rest, Christopher said calmly. Good for you to talk. What are we going to eat? She grinned. We can live without frills. He was sure of his words. Lately, Jenna realized that they had drifted apart. She dialed her friend's number. "Hi," she told her. "Come and visit." After the greeting, her friend called her. "I will." She packed up the department and they left the house together. While visiting, the girl could exhale a little. In the back of her mind, she remembered that she had feelings for Christopher, and as strong as before. But housework, work, and everything else, so exhausting that she wanted nothing more. "Did you go through the store?" a friend was wondering. "Sure." Displayed Jenna a bottle of wine on the table. "That's good. We'll rest now," said the girlfriend. Here, visiting lapdog. Jenna could relax. She was not thinking about anything. The daughter was busy with her friend's daughter. They were about the same age. And the girls were sitting in the kitchen talking. "You look very tired," Alina said. "I know that myself." Jenna realized that if before she always had her nails painted, eyes painted, hair styled, then now she didn't care about that. A ponytail on her head, nothing at all on her hands. "Go on vacation," suggested Alenka. "I can't," shook her head Jenna. They could sit up till late at night. And then Jenna and her daughter would drive home. Christopher was already asleep. She developed, washed her face, and lay down next to him. "Where was it yesterday?" he asked in the morning. "You know Elena didn't have a rash. Now I had a headache." "How do I know all this?" Christopher answered it all. "That's it. I don't want to talk anymore," wrinkled Jenna. She had finally poured boiling water into her mug and was now trying to take a sip of the scalding drink. "What else don't you want?" He was kind of cocky. "Christopher, please. I'll be right out, doing the dishes and vacuuming." She asked him, "What if I don't feel like it?" He wasn't acting like he always does. "You know, when you needed help, I did everything, whether I wanted to or not." She would never have told him that. But now he's really pissed her off. "And nobody asked you to." Those were the most hurtful words Christopher ever said to his wife. "Well, you didn't say no once." She came over because she felt like she might cry. "Did you misunderstand?" Apparently, he realized he said the wrong thing. And now he was trying to get out of it. "I'm going to work. Can you feed Emily when she wakes up?" She turned around and pretended to be busy. "Will you be long?" Christopher asked her as he followed Jenna down the hall. "I don't know," she shrugged. Good, he wanted to kiss her. But Jenna was already out. She couldn't show anyone her weakness. No, she's strong. She's got a baby. There's a mom to help. And there's Christopher, who has a hard time too. She wiped her tears, exhaled, and moved on. Jenna arrived at work. There was a lot to do. Today was a small children's party. The script was ready. It was left to hide the tasks that were meant for the kids. Jenna did everything. She knew that in 3 o'clock it would be over. When the kids arrived, Jenna was already in costume. She was smiling, taking everyone along with her. It was a lot of fun. The kids were laughing. They ran, played, and danced. At the very end, Jenna put on a show for the kids, after which everyone started to disperse, and the presenters cleaned up what was left after the party. But that was it. And now home. She looked around the room and went to change. She went up to her office, changed, and was ready to go out, while she said goodbye to the watchman who had just come in. Jack asked tiredly, But that's okay." Smiled Jenna. "Okay, have a happy journey so far." He looked and smiled. "Thank you." It was nice to have a lot of people respecting her around here. She went outside, walked down the porch, and went to the gate. "Excuse me," she heard from across the parking lot. Yes, she turned and saw a very handsome man heading in her direction. She'd seen him at the party today. He was picking up one of the kids. "I'm sorry to be like this, but I didn't know how to meet you," he told her. Why would you want to meet me? She didn't understand a thing. She liked him. He didn't hide it. Good. Why don't you drive me home? Jenna looked at the car from which the stranger had gotten out a few minutes ago. She didn't really want to take public transportation. Of course, gladly, he took the bags from her hands and led her to Robert's car. He got behind the wheel. Jenna looked at him. A beautiful name, just like you. He tried to compliment her. Everyone, let's go already. She sighed. Maybe we can stop for a meal on the way. Are you tired from work? I guess I offered my wife. Good. Jenna at that moment does not know why she agreed, because her husband and daughter were waiting for her at home. Wow. And I thought you would refuse me. Robert was surprised and smiled. But I agreed. The girl laughed. That's good. They stopped near a small restaurant. They went in. Robert ordered something. Jenna couldn't decide for a long time. She hadn't eaten anything since this morning, so now she wanted everything. Finally, she did it. Now they both waited for the order to arrive. Silent. How about some wine? Robert suggested. You're driving, aren't you? She was surprised. I'm here for you to relax, he explained. I could use a glass, agreed Jenna. Then Robert made a sign to the waiter. He came over and took the order. I'm so uncomfortable sitting here with you, Jenna said. And for some reason I felt ashamed of myself. Why? He didn't understand. My husband and child are waiting for me at home, and I'm sitting here with another man, drinking wine. She smiled. What's the big deal? I'm just here with a good friend to unwind a little. Of course, that wasn't true at all. Who's at your house? She asked the question because it had been plaguing her since she had met Robert today. Cat, he shrugged. I don't know what else to say. Isn't there a wife? She asked in complete seriousness. What makes you think I have one? Robert didn't understand. What do you mean? Whose baby did you pick up today? She admitted to him that she'd seen it. It's his nephew, his sister's son, he reassured her. At that moment their order was brought to them. They started to eat. Either Jenna had not eaten in a long time, or the food here was simply divine. She was alive, and at this point she let out a groan, rolled her eyes. Do you always eat like this? Robert laughed. Oh, sorry. The girl realized what she had done wrong. No, it's nice to look at it. He smiled. You never told me why you came up to me. They knew each other, just a little. But Jenna felt with him as if she had known him for a long time. What do you mean you didn't tell me because you liked it? Me and the guys were at your place once, and I noticed you back then. He said that and stopped smiling. What did this girl notice so sadly? A few sips of wine on an empty stomach had done the trick. She was relaxed and open-mouthed. You have a husband, kids, and I wanted us to make something work, he told her. What's wrong with you? She's tense. No, it's okay. We'll be friends. He reached out and touched her. After they ate, Robert paid and they went to the car. Should we go for another drive? He asked Jenna. No, I have to go home. She shook her head. Okay, can I have your cell phone? He asked and glanced at the girl. Yes, she answered calmly. They drove to the house where Jenna lived. She got out of the car. All right, promised his wife, and did not leave while on stage, walked into the driveway. It was nice to have someone else paying attention to her. The girl went into the house. Everything was the same there. No one had done anything. Christopher was lying on the couch again. As usual, she dropped her things and walked to the kitchen. Emily was sitting at the table drawing something. I'm hungry, she said, now turned Jenna to the stove, and thought to herself that her husband could at least do something. After she got everything done, fed the baby and bought her up and put her to bed. She wanted to talk to Christopher, walked into the room. Have you been drinking on the job? He asked, and he didn't take his eyes off the screen of his phone. Stopped at a restaurant afterward to eat. Had a glass, didn't make a deal. What, she wasn't alone? That's all. Did you sit there alone? Christopher asked. Yes, that's all he needed to know. Okay, good night. He turned sideways. Aren't we going to talk? She was in shock. Nothing. He kept staring at his phone. Okay. She got up and went to her daughter's house. It was frustrating to the point of tears. Why does everything have to be like this? She tries her best to make sure everything at home is good, and nobody appreciates it. Everything is taken for granted. Jenna was back at work this morning. Robert had texted her to say good morning. She smiled and replied to him. A correspondence started between them. It seemed to the girl that it distracted her a lot from everyday life. "I will come tonight," wrote Robert on Friday. "Good," she replied to him. Jenna knew her husband would be picking up her daughter from daycare, and she was going to Neil today anyway. So it was okay to ride for a couple hours. She waited for him at the gate. Robert pulled up. Jenna got into the car and said hello to him once again. "Where are we going?" the young man asked. "I don't know. Maybe the same restaurant where we were the first time," she suggested. Well, he didn't care as long as with her they had already learned a lot about each other during the week-long correspondence. Now they had some common topics to talk about. "How are you?" Robert started with the usual question. "Fine," Jenna shrugged. Nothing had changed in her life. "I see. You don't want to talk." He looked at the girl. "Order me some wine," she asked. Just like last time, Robert showed the waiter that he needed to come over. He did as the girl asked. They sat there, smiling at each other. Robert took Jenna's hand. "Don't." She pulled it away. "Why?" "I can see you're not feeling well," he said. What didn't she realize? Should we drop everything and change things for the better? He asked her. "No. What are you, Christopher?" She began to tell how they met, how they found out about the disease, and how she nursed him back to health. "You're like Mother Teresa." He was serious. "It's okay," Jenna said sadly. "Yeah, I see they brought their order. Just like last time. It was delicious." Robert was saying something, telling about his work, making the girl laugh. It was nice to be with this man. It took her mind off everything that had been happening to her lately. "Let's go to my place," asked Jenna Robert. "No," she said firmly then. "Where to?" He didn't want to let her go. "Home. Come on, I'll show you." She got up from the table. Great. He was glad Jenna wasn't going anywhere. Did the girl say where to go today? It was on the outskirts of town. When they were there, Robert marveled at how beautiful it was here. A highway followed by a field, and then the horizon. It all blended together. "Do you realize why I brought you here?" she asked. "Yes, it's beautiful," he agreed with her. They just sat in the car and looked into the distance. Afterwards, Jenna asked him to drive her home. Robert turned to her, ran his hand over her cheek, leaned in, wanted to kiss her. "No," she turned away. I don't understand why he was looking at someone he liked. "I have a husband. I love him," the girl said. "I see," sighed the young man. "Let's go then." She waited for him to start the engine. "You know, I can see you're not feeling well," he said softly. "Robert, don't ruin the relationship we have," Jenna asked him. "Okay. I'm sorry." He started the car and they drove off. "I'm home." She went into the apartment. No one answered. Jenna walked over to her daughter, stroked her head, kissed her, asked if she was hungry. After Emily said that she and Daddy had eaten, Jenna headed into the other room where Christopher was lying on the couch again. He was with his tablet today. "Is that okay?" she asked. "What are you talking about?" He didn't understand. "I'm at work all day and you haven't gone anywhere," the girl said. She looked at her husband and realized that there was a problem in their family and it had to be solved somehow. She didn't want to leave him because she loved something from me. "Do you want to?" he asked. I sat down to talk. Jenna leaned over to him and kissed him. "Have you been drinking again?" He heard the smell from her. "Look, if things were good in my family, would I be doing this?" She remembered how good things used to be. "Are you trying to accuse me of something now?" He turned around. "No," she shook her head. "Then what?" He looked at her with one eye. "Let's go to a psychologist," Jenna suggested. "I don't need any psychologist." He sounded sure of it. "I do." I was ashamed to admit it, but it was true. "Well, go for it." It was obvious he didn't want to talk to Jenna anymore. She went into the kitchen. She wanted to cry, but she knew it wouldn't help her. The next day, when the girl came to work, She saw that there were flowers on the table. "Who brought these?" was surprised Jenna. "I don't know. The watchman brought them," he said. "What's for you?" The coworkers answered. "Okay, thanks. Nice." She took a photo and sent it to Robert. "Your handiwork," she captioned the photo. "What did you want to make you feel good in the morning?" "Moody," he told her. "Thank you." Now she sent it to him. In the evening, he waited for her again. "Why are you doing this? Apart from being friends, you and I can't be anything else." She said it with confidence. "Let's go. I'll just drive you home." He opened the door for her. Jenna got in. They drove off. They didn't talk about anything today. When they got to the driveway, she wanted to get out, but Robert took her hand. "Tell me, do you really love him or do you just feel sorry for him?" he asked the girl. "What kind of question is that?" She put her foot out into the street, and her hand Robert held it that way. "Answer," he waited. "If you don't let go now, we won't socialize at all anymore," she told him. Sorry, he let her go, and Jenna walked quickly toward the entryway. At home, everything was the same. For a long time, nothing had changed at all. Almost every day, Robert would come over to Jenna's house, but she wouldn't let him do anything. She just hung out with him. It was relaxed and fun and interesting. "Are you working again today?" One day on his day off, Christopher came up to his wife. "Probably haven't called yet," Jenna said. Christopher came to her, hugged her. Jenna immediately remembered how tender he was and what they had before. "Maybe we could go out," she suggested. "No, I don't feel like going out." He spoke in her ear. "Why does it like this?" Jenna asked. "I don't know." He shrugged his shoulders. "Let's go on vacation. I'll buy the vouchers. We'll take a vacation without Emily," Jenna suggested again. "Good." Christopher was even happier. "Then I'll look for a vacation tomorrow," Jenna smiled. She turned and kissed Christopher. Tonight they slept together. Everything was fine. The next day, he wished his wife good morning and made coffee. "Thank you." She was home for the second day in a row in the last 6 months. No one had called her in to work. Jenna sat down at the computer to search for travel vouchers. She sat for a long time, choosing. Sometimes Christopher came up to her, asking questions, offering advice. When Jenna had everything done, all that was left was to pay. She did that. The flight was a week away. Now she had to talk to the principal about taking the short vacation. "Are you ready?" She had packed all her bags, Emily, taken to her mom's house, and was now ready for anything. She hadn't spoken to Robert in a week. He had won her over with texts and calls. But Jenna didn't want to pay attention to that. Sure enough, Christopher was smiling. The next day, the couple hailed a cab. They drove to the airport. In the car, Christopher held Jenna's hand, and afterward they took their bags and went to check in. Then a few hours on the airplane, and now they were almost near the sea. Their hotel stood near the sea itself. Now they were heading there. When they got into the room, they were amazed at the view from the window. On the first day, they went to the beach, but only to scout the situation. Everything was gorgeous. At first, Christopher went everywhere with Jenna, but after a couple days, he got carried away with his tablet again and didn't want to go anywhere. "Are you really not interested in anything?" Jenna asked him. "Why go out every day?" He didn't understand, but we could lie at home. They started fighting again. And what he didn't understand her grievances. Nothing, so Jenna turned around and walked away. "Where are you going?" "Ask after Christopher." "To the sea. I want to be alone." And found. And cried again. Why does she always have to be alone? He's never around. Always, whatever difficulties or joys there were in life. The girl was alone with it all. It was at this point that Jenna decided to text Robert to say hi. She typed the message. "I thought you weren't going to write anymore," he replied after a second. Sorry, she didn't know what else to write. "I totally understand." "When are you coming back?" he asked. "How do you know?" She was curious. "I was at your work. They said you were on vacation, Robert admitted. I see. After a week, she didn't keep anything from him. Can I hope to see you again? Robert asked her. Probably yes. She wasn't sure, but for some reason she wanted to. Good, then I look forward to your return, he wrote. Great, bye. She wrote and looked out at the sea blue in the distance. It was so beautiful. Jenna relaxed a little. Right now, she was wishing she had brought Emily with her. She would be running around here now. She would have loved it for sure. The rest of the week went well, but that was it for Jenna. Christopher went to the sea a couple more times and spent the rest of the time in the hotel on the bed. We're flying home tomorrow. Let's at least spend tonight together. Jenna asked her husband, Are we not together? It became strange to him, as if yes, but as if not. She approached him. Jenna, understand, I get tired quickly, and I just don't want to go anywhere. He took her hand. I understand, but the sea air is good for you, especially for you. She leaned over and kissed him. So it gets here, in the room. Christopher pointed to the open window. Yes, but that's not it at all. She looked where he was pointing. Jenna finally managed to convince her husband to take her to the restaurant. He sat, ate, didn't talk about anything. Beautiful music came on. Let's dance, Jenna called him. No, it's not my thing. He said no. Okay. Jenna realized she felt like crying again. They went home. The next day, they had to fly home. Jenna bought some souvenirs. The bags were packed. They were ready to go. The airplane was silent. In the car, too. They were finally home. I'll pick up Lee on the way. Wanted Jenna to see her friend and cry, but only she came out of the house. She spotted Robert's car and pulled up. What are you doing here? She asked him. You don't know. He looked at her and smiled. I see. She looked up at her windows. And what do you understand? He took her hand and pulled her to him. Wait. She walked around the car and sat in the front seat. And what next? He was getting curious. Let's go, she asked. Robert complied with her request. They drove off again where it had once been so beautiful. Do you mind? He turned to the girl. No, not even in favor. She smiled. Why does she have such a good relationship with this man? Willing to do a lot of things for her, and the husband she loves so much is willing to do nothing. Tell me. They stopped, and Robert turned to her. What is there to tell? We've been on vacation for so many days, and he hasn't even left the room. Jenna said indignantly, Let's go to my place. He touched her chin. Let's go. She nodded no way. He quickly started the car. They drove off. On the way, Emily called her mom and told her that they were having problems with Christopher. She's coming over tomorrow. And I warned you. Her mom reminded her of what she said before the wedding. Oh, don't start, please, asked her daughter. Okay, we'll wait for tomorrow, the woman said and hung up. Is everything okay? Asked the man behind the wheel. Yes, nodded Jenna. She had made up her mind today that she would go with him and try to build a completely different relationship, but she didn't know if she could do it or not. They arrived and went up to Robert's apartment. He immediately set up a table, got some wine, some appetizers. He took a beer from the fridge himself. What were you getting ready? It made the girl laugh. No, but it was always there just in case. He smiled, opened his wine, filled his glass, then got himself a beer. Thank you for your support. She toasted okay, and thank you for everything. He took a small sip. For what? She didn't understand. For what you are. He reached for her, wanting to kiss her. Jenna was ready for it. She even closed her eyes. But then she pictured Christopher, remembered how much she loved him, and what they had. No, I can't. She turned away and opened her eyes. Here we go, Robert sighed. I'm sorry, I can't. She stood up. Where are you going? The landlord didn't understand. I have to go home. She went into the hallway. Jenna, wait. He followed her. No, I'm sorry for all the nerve. Is there something you're hoping for? But I love my husband, and I need to go home, she said. All right. He didn't try to talk her out of it. Jenna left his apartment. She went home reluctantly. She knew there was nothing new waiting for her there, but she went anyway. She wanted to talk to her husband. Maybe now he would hear her and understand. What if she told him about Robert? Tell him a young man was hitting on her. I wonder what his reaction would be. She asked herself. Even though Robert had offered to drive her, she hadn't accepted. She needed to take a walk to think. At that moment, Mom texted. She told her to go to them if things were bad. Or maybe she really should go to her mom's. She stopped, but after that she waved her head and went home, even though she didn't really want to. I opened the door at home and she walked in. But when she turned around, I froze with surprise. There was nothing in the apartment. She could see that from the hallway. The TV, computer, laptop, all the appliances from the kitchen, anything of any value was missing. Jenna's first thought was that the apartment had been burglarized. She rushed to the wall, opened the closet where there was a jewelry box and money. What it was, she couldn't believe her eyes. The rings, earrings, and bracelets were there, but the money was missing. Clearly, if it had been thieves, they would have taken everything. But here she walked further, saw that there were no clothes in the closet, went to the nightstand. There were no papers either. She sat down on the couch and cried. Why did he do this to me? I never spared anything for him. I loved him. And he sobbed her to tears. Jenna dialed Christopher's number. He had blacklisted her. She tried to text him on social media. He blocked her there too. After that, the girl called her mom and told her everything. She went to the kitchen, opened the drawer where the medicine cabinet was. She took out a sedative and drank it. She noticed a piece of paper on the table, walked over, smirked. It was a letter from him. In it he wrote that he loved her and thanked her for everything she'd done for him. But he realized he needed to leave. Also talked about blocking her so she wouldn't push pity in return. Jenna grinned. There was a knock on the door. She went to open it. Standing on the doorstep was Robert. What are you doing here? She was stunned. I realize that if I didn't catch up with you now, I'd lose you forever, he told her. Robert, he's gone. She showed him the empty apartment. What a bastard. His fists clenched. That's enough. She led her guest into the kitchen. They sat down at the table. Jenna poured tea, showed Robert what the man she loved so much and was willing to die herself to save him had written to her. I see. He read it. Pack your bags. I don't get it. She looked at him with red eyes. Let's go to my place. He wasn't asking now, he was affirming. I didn't even, she said. He walked up to her and started kissing her. It was so unexpected that Jenna responded. There would be no objection. He took the bag and started putting some of her things in it. Let me do it. She took it from him. Great, Robert said. Emily stopped in the hallway. Jenna, just like you wanted, we'll pick her up tomorrow. He put his arm around her shoulders and led her outside. You're walking. The girl was surprised. She'd never seen him without a car. I had a beer, he reminded her. They came to his house. He poured her wine and sat her in an armchair. Look, you need to calm down. I don't want things to work out between you and me. You can stay with me for a while. We'll pick up your daughter tomorrow, and I'll help you with everything. Now he's acting like Jenna with Christopher. Thank you for everything. She clung to him from the soothing wine and tears. Jenna quickly boiled it down. Robert carried her to the bed, covered her with a plaid, and closed the door behind him. He really liked her and would do anything to make sure she reciprocated him. The next day, Jenna did not go to work. She said she had a family emergency. She went to her mom's house, who worked 2 and 2, and it was her day off. Hi. She came into the apartment. Hello, her mom hugged her. And Jenna started crying again. No need to shed tears, so it was meant to be. In fact, the woman was angry, but she couldn't say anything bad right now. Knew her daughter would still be on his side. They went into the kitchen. They sat there talking for a long time. You know who helped me? Jenna asked her mom. No, of course not. She looked at her surprised. I have an acquaintance whom I think it's today we'll meet, said the girl. Just acquaintances, or her mother looked at her enigmatically. Mom just smiled for now. Jenna, it makes me happy that you are smiling. They hugged each other again. In the evening, Jenna went to daycare, picked up her daughter, and together they drove to Robert's house. And then they went with him to Mom's to keep her informed. Hello. Robert entered the apartment and gave the woman flowers. Come in, she invited him in. When everyone met and sat down at the table, a casual conversation began. You know how much I love your daughter, and if it were up to me, I'd propose to her today, Robert said. But that's okay. Now they'll divorce. And go ahead. Green light. The woman smiled. Jenna was putting Emily to bed at that moment. She came back, only to hear the end of the conversation. They married me without me. She smiled. Come back, daughter. And I advise you not to ignore Robert. You can see at once that this is a good man, Mom began to say. Calm down. My husband left me yesterday. And you're already giving me a new one, Jenna said sternly. Why is he? That hurt Robert. Okay, don't fight. Time will sort things out, said the wise woman. That's right. Today Robert said goodbye to Jenna, went home. The girl went back to work. She could not think about Simeon. As soon as she started to do so, tears came to her eyes. Why do you need him? Forget it. Go and file for divorce. Colleagues used to say. Robert came every night. He met the girl, gave flowers, until he calmed down and made no attempts to get closer. A month passed. Jenna kept waiting to see if he would call or write, but Christopher never showed up. Under pressure from her mom and friends, she filed for divorce. In a month, she was to be a free woman. Emily suffered the most. She cried just like her mom when she found out her dad had left. Everything would be all right. Resolved Jenna that she would not cry anymore. Ino looked at her daughter and hugged her. They stayed at Jenna's mother's house for a while longer, but all the time it could not last. And at some point the girl asked Robert to take her home. He did everything she asked. He has the most beloved woman. A month later, her mom called, asked how she was doing. And then she said she was expecting her for a visit tonight. So give me the weekend. Jenna was surprised, because today was Wednesday. No, I need you to come today. Mother insisted. Okay. The girl didn't understand the urgency. She picked Emily up from daycare and drove to her mother's house. When she arrived, it was business as usual. Mom, what was the urgency, she wanted to know. Come in, she called her into the room. Wow. Jenna went there and saw a gorgeous table that was set and stood in the middle. Why are you surprised? Sat down on the table, the woman sat down. I don't know what kind of celebration she showed with her eyes at everything that was here. You'll find out soon enough. At that moment there was a knock on the door. Mother went to open it. On the threshold stood Robert. He was wearing a suit and carrying flowers. Jenna immediately understood everything. She smiled. Robert walked up to her, looked at the woman and the girl who were standing there. Jenna, will you be my wife? He held out a box to her. I don't even know. She looked at everyone. Mommy, say yes. Her daughter held up her finger. You'd think she was looking at the man across the table. You first before the answer, and then think as much as you want, spoke Robert. Okay, I'll do it. She was angry with paint and took the flowers and the box. You made the right choice. Kissed her. Robert kissed her. So now to the table. The mother was happy with the way things turned out. They sat and talked, and then Robert asked her to come with him. Emily, are you staying here? Her grandmother asked her. Yes, she nodded and looked at her mother. Don't you think it's going too fast? Jenna asked Robert when they were already outside. It's okay. I love you very much. He was bringing her over to his place. I can't tell you the same thing yet, the girl admitted. I don't have to yet, he smiled. Thank you. She pressed herself against him. Tonight, When they arrived at the man's apartment, he was finally able to kiss her. Jenna was smiling, and Robert could see that he could make her happy. "I have to go to work tomorrow," she told him and looked at her watch. "Stop thinking about it already." He kissed her again, and then the wedding preparations began. Robert wanted not just a wedding. He wanted a wedding, and the most beautiful one. For his beloved, Robert dreamed of her becoming a princess. "What are you thinking?" Jenna saw that he was often pensive. "Did he tell you the truth? And what did you have in mind?" She began to wonder. "Nothing." He winked at his future wife. "Okay, it's always secrets." She was really happy. And now she couldn't think about the man who'd betrayed her. The day of the wedding had arrived. Jenna was wearing a beautiful dress. Next to her stood the groom. He was also very handsome. Guests, relatives, and friends congratulated. Everyone wished only happiness and great love. "Daughter, don't doubt him. He'll be a great husband and father." "Mommy, I'm happy for you," Emily said to her. "Thank you, family." Jenna smiled and hugged them. "And you dare to be unhappy? And stop reminiscing about the past," threatened the woman with a finger. "Good," she nodded. They arrived home in the evening. It wasn't any easier with them today either. "Are you really so perfect?" Did the wife look at her husband? Naturally, she didn't. "Waited this long to start bullying you now?" He laughed. She pounded him in the chest with her fist. "You have no idea how much I love you." He pulled her to him for the second time that evening. "Do I love you?" She spoke softly. "What? What did you say?" "Say it again." He looked at her. "I love you." She wasn't looking at him. "Jesus, Jenna, we're gonna be the happiest couple ever." Robert started kissing her. "Thank you." She closed her eyes, and it seemed like she was the happiest person on earth. "Can you promise me something?" he asked his wife. "Sure." She looked up at him. "Stop being strong. I'll do anything for you." He pushed her a little away from him and was now looking straight into her eyes. "I don't know how to do that." She remembered what she had done before. "But you'll learn, promise." Didn't let go of her hands. "I'll do my best." She nodded, but didn't take her eyes away. "Good. I believe you. You're my love forever. And I swear to you that you'll be like a stone wall behind me." He pulled her to him again. "Thank you." With one lip, the girl said. She believed that happiness might be smiling upon her now.